I'd like to call this meeting of the Optional Forms of County Government Study Commission to order. It is currently 5:38, according to my time. If we'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance. Bryant, would you lead us?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Please be seated. Are there any changes to the agenda?
I think there's a couple corrections that should be made.
Fire away.
On August 18th,
Agenda first.
oh, sorry.
Well, if you're
Yeah,
looking
on
at
the
minutes,
minutes.
we're not quite there yet.
Okay, sorry.
Changes to the agenda first.
No,
No. Can I have a motion to accept the agenda as presented?
So moved.
Second. We have the motion. It is seconded. Favor of accepting it? It is accepted. Announcements. I'd like to make an announcement. I intend this week to present to this commission a change to the bylaws. We will be looking at that either September 29th or October 6th for an actual vote. The change that I intend to submit will be that the alternates who have been working with us on the interviews will continue to work with us on the interviews, but will not participate in the deliberations. That will leave it to the 9 of us, more time for each of us to make our statements. I based it on what I see in a legal jury where the alternates sit in and listen to the testimony, but when it comes down to the deliberations, the legal jury, only the actual 12-person jury deliberates. So I'm going to submit that. Yes, Bruce?
That's an interesting perspective, given the fact that here the commission deliberates, but in a jury, none of the jury really deliberates until the end.
We don't deliberate till the end either.
Yeah.
We'll be taking testimony. We'll finish with testimony before we begin deliberations.
Yeah.
Just the way a jury takes testimony, takes evidence, and then deliberates.
Is there a particular reason for this?
The reason for it is that I think that 12 of us has been too much in the discussion, and I'd like to get down to the core 9. I think it's going to be enough at that point. Alternates are welcome to observe, but I think at that point it should come down to those of us who are actually going to be making the decision what we recommend, and that's where the deliberation should fall.
Well, presumably we'll actually have discussion about this at the meeting toward the end of the month.
I'm merely telling you
Yeah.
now, giving you
Right.
notice that I intend to this week send out an email with an amendment to the bylaws.
Okay, thank you.
That will
Which
be
we'll vote
available.
on.
I'm sorry?
Which we'll vote on.
Which will come up 2 weeks after it has gone out. Like I say, either the 29th or the 6th. The 29th would be 2 weeks. We're taking
May
public
I
comment that
yeah.
night. It may not be a good night for it,
That night.
which is why I'm looking at possibly the 6th to actually vote on it.
Yeah.
But I'm just letting you know that that's what's going to be happening. You can look for it, you can prepare for it, and you can decide how you want to vote over the 2 weeks, 3 weeks, whatever it is.
Thanks.
We move on to the approval of the minutes, August 3rd and August 18th minutes that we have before us. Tamara, you said you had some issues.
sorry, jumped the gun on that one.
That's quite all right.
August 18th,
Uh-huh.
second point under Ms. Thomas's testimony, her name is misspelled. Don't know if it's supposed to be Thomas.
Thomas, okay. 8A, it's spelled correctly, you said. Second point,
It said Mr. McDowell was the first point. Ms. Thomas gave numerous examples. Her name is misspelled.
okay, Ms. Thomas.
Page 3 on August 18th.
I'm still on page 2, my apologies.
It is.
Yes, okay, page 3, halfway down the page, in response to questions from commission members, the second bullet point, Ms. Thomas is spelled without the H.
And then on the August 3rd minutes on page 3, last sentence of the main paragraph, beginning paragraph, it says, she stressed that a person in that person can have significant input. I've been assuming it means that person in that position can have significant input.
Let's see what we're talking about.
The
Dan Bennett
paragraph
stayed,
begins,
kind of
Mr.
discussed their chiefs
McHugh.
operating as shared phrase that role. Looks to me like position would be the appropriate phrase there. Nancy, can you see what we're talking about? Nancy's behind you, Tamara, if you could show her what you're looking at.
Which one? Right here.
Oh, in that position. First, in that position.
Okay, we have it confirmed that that should be position.
And then the next sentence, Phil Ward asked how much election impact. It's just grammatically, I think, a little bit off.
How much impact elections have under.
Perfect.
Yes. Thank you, Tim.
Thank you.
Anything else?
Not for me.
Anyone else?
So I will move that we accept the minutes with these corrections as noted.
Okay, both at the same time?
Yes.
Okay. We have the motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to accept the minutes. All in favor? Minutes are accepted. To the best of my knowledge, we have no reports tonight or old business. That moves us straight into the new business of interviews. We have Sheriff Ben Wolfinger over to my left here, and County Assessor Bella Kovacs. Is it Bella or Bela?
Bela.
Bela Kovacs, to my right. Ben, if you'd like to start us off?
Thank you. And thank you for the opportunity to address the commission. As you know, I am Ben Wolfinger, and just one slight correction there. I'm the retired sheriff. I see the sheriff in the back of the room, but I'm the retired guy. So I was hired as the deputy sheriff with Kootenai County Sheriff's Office on April Fool's Day, April 1st, 1983. I retired December 31st of 2020 as the county sheriff. I served full-time for the sheriff's office for 37 years and 9 months. I worked for 3 different sheriffs before I was elected. Floyd Murph Stalder, probably not many people in this county remember Murph, Pierce Clegg, and Rocky Watson. During my career, I had the opportunity to serve in many areas of the sheriff's office. I started in the jail that was actually in a building where we currently sit. This is the original site. I worked in patrol, working my way up through the ranks, become the division commander, transferred to investigations where I led a group of seasoned investigators who knew a whole lot more what they were doing than I did. And I was promoted to the rank of captain where I oversaw both patrol and investigations. In 1999, Rocky Watson transferred me to the jail. He said, I want you to do 2 things. I want you to run the day-to-day operations, oversee that, and you need to get voter approval for an expansion of the jail. Would be the first of the 2 during my career here. I oversaw the records and services division, included records, 911 center, civil, driver's license, and the auto mechanic shop. I literally have supervised every aspect of the sheriff's office during my career. One of the great educational opportunities I had, though, during my career was that I got to take part in Leadership Coeur d'Alene, sponsored by the Coeur d'Alene Chamber of Commerce. They allowed me to learn a whole lot more about our community, and I thought I was, being a native North Idaho, and I thought I knew a lot already. But what it also allowed me to do is it opened the door so I could serve on the legislative committee, serve on their board of directors, and in the 2004-2005 season, be the chairman of the board of directors for the Chamber of Commerce. The first and only time they've ever had a law enforcement officer lead the Chamber of Commerce. I'm not sure if that's a good thing or a bad thing. I also had the opportunity to serve 5 years as a councilman for the city of Coeur d'Alene. I was appointed in December of 2000 to fill a vacancy, successfully running to retain my seat in 2001, and choosing not to seek re-election in 2005, since the campaign would need to be run in the middle of a little investigation we had going on at the time called Groney and Duncan, as you may remember. That gave me a unique perspective on local government, not only the county but also the city side. While at the sheriff's office, I began the program of listing wanted people in the newspaper. Originally, we ran the program to help the courts collect unpaid fines. the first year, collecting about $100,000 in unpaid fines that they hadn't collected the year before. It also kept a lot of people out of jail because we get spouses, bosses, friends, say, gee, I saw this guy's name in the paper. If I just go pay his fine, will he need to come to jail? And the answer, of course, was no. It kept people out of our jail. I'm proud to say that's a very popular column still. By the way, the best source of information, ex-spouses. Ex-spouses. For about 20 years, I had the collateral duty of being the public information officer for the sheriff's office. That's the talking head, the person in front of the media. And for more than 10 years, I also had a collateral duty of being a registered lobbyist to the Idaho legislature to challenge bills that have been a hardship on law enforcement and to promote bills that would be a benefit, particularly a benefit to northern Idaho. During that time, I was able to write several bills and have them passed into law here in Idaho. One of the ones I'm most proud of was the ability for us to tap an inmate's commissary account, that account where they can buy candy or goodies out of the little store at the jail. We could tap that to pay for their medical costs. Save the county about $100,000 the first year. I watched the Idaho legislature struggle with the language and optional forms of county government that would eventually become the laws that you're working under here tonight. You know, counties in Idaho are diverse. When I look at places like Clark County with less than 900 residents in the entire county, or Camas County with just over 1,100 residents, they're hard to compare to Ada, Canyon, or Kootenai County with our thousands and thousands of residents. For the most part, county services are mandated by statute. If we want to get rid of responsibility, it literally takes an act of the Idaho legislature to make it happen. Most counties work well with the elected officials as originally set in the Idaho Constitution. It works well because it has checks and balances built into it. In fact, the Idaho Supreme Court ruled to support those checks and balances as well as the autonomy of the separate elected officials in a case that's near and dear to our hearts here. It's a case of Allied Bail Bonds versus Kootenai County. I have personally acted as some of those checks and balances on more than one occasion. For instance, when the county was rewriting their policy manual, there were many policies that the Board of County Commissioners could not impose on the employees who worked under separate elected officials. These included what they wear to work. The county commissioners were not going to tell the sheriff what the uniform looked like from the sheriff's office. They can set our budget, but they don't get to tell us what the uniform looks like. Or who we could carry as passengers in a car. Gee, if somebody breaks down alongside the road, I don't want to have permission given to a deputy to give them a ride to assistance. But that was the kind of policies we were fighting. I've told more than one county commissioner that they were outside their scope of authority and would not provide them information, including such items as whether a person who was temporarily filling a supervisory role was qualified in a commissioner's opinion, or which employee may have been diagnosed with COVID-19 during my last year of office. The elected officials in this county were placed here by the people and are answerable to the people. As a sheriff, I did not answer to the Board of County Commissioners. That is not to say that we didn't try to work together to reach common goals, but they were not my boss. When I served on the city council, all the department heads were hired or appointed. They all had to answer to the city council. That was a 6-member council plus a mayor. No 2 council persons could order something to be done by a department head, or could only 2 terminate a department head. That would be the case if the BOCC were to appoint the current slate of elected officials. Unfortunately or fortunately, depending on your point of view, there are not a great deal of qualifications to run for public office in Idaho. The only county position that has any requirements over the basics of residency and registered voter is that of prosecutor for obvious reasons. The sheriff does not have to have a law enforcement background, nor do they have to be certified by the Peace Officer Standards and Training Academy. The coroner does not have to have a background in medicine, let alone forensic medicine, and the list goes on for all the elected officials. However, I believe, and it's my opinion, that the gentleman who framed our original state constitution left it to the voters to decide who was best qualified and who would actively take part in the checks and balances system that was enacted.
Cities are different because cities do not have to be. If a community opts for incorporation, they get to decide what services they will provide their residents. Let us not forget that people who live in the incorporated cities still pay county taxes and as taxpayers receive county services. Counties, on the other hand, are mandated to exist. The services elected officials are in charge of are largely mandates. If those officials are not doing their job correctly, the people will fire them by not voting for them. In fact, when I ran for the city council, I said, if I'm not doing a good job, then don't vote for me. But I was the top vote getter out of a slate of 7. In the county, the buck stops at each elected official's desk. In my opinion, do I think there should be some changes? Yes. I think that a manager provides consistency and leadership to appointed positions, allowing commissioners to focus on their statutory duties and not the day-to-day operations of the several department heads report to the board. No corporation with a budget exceeding $100 million is run by a board. They all have a CEO or manager. Boards set policy and direction and do those duties here mandated by statute. A manager oversees operations. This also keeps commissioners from trying to be micromanagers in areas where they do not have authority or expertise. Additionally, I believe a manager brings consistency since many boards turn over 1 or 2 people every 2 years. This is a renewed learning curve that is not an efficient way to run government. Too many mistakes are repeated, and no one carries the corporate history to avoid the pitfalls of yesteryear. I don't believe that a board of commissioners, not just this board, but any board, has the expertise to hire positions that are by their very nature of their positions policymakers. Some people forget that when they get elected, they answer to all the people, not just those from one political party or another. Some lose sight of what they need to do is what's best for the majority of the people, not just their friends or associates. That's how I ran my office, and I reminded my staff that we serve everyone equally. I believe that a hired person removes the checks and balances that the Idaho Constitution originally set in motion for county governments. A person is a lot less likely to tell their boss no when it needs to be said as compared to a person who is elected to an autonomous position by the people and needs to tell another elected official no. Now, that doesn't mean there's not checks and balances outside of the voters. If a county elected official is suspected of being criminally out of line, the Attorney General's office must investigate. I know more than one sheriff who made criminal mistakes, were investigated, indicted, and convicted of crimes, removed from office, and sent to jail or prison. If people do not like the policies of an elected official, although legal they may be, then it's the people who will hold them accountable. This is only true for the county elected officials, not city or state officials, not any other elected officials, just the 9 elected officials in the 44 different counties. These laws for alternate forms of county government were enacted in 1996. Don't you think it's odd that not one county in the past 25 years has voted to change their form of county government? I'm really happy to try to answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Ben. Bela? Nancy, did we need to make some adjustments to cameras? Sorry, Bela, I believe that she needed to adjust a camera in order for the people on Zoom to be able to see your presentation. What's that?
And we'll get copies of the PowerPoint to everyone.
Okay. Bela, if you go.
Some preliminary comments. I'd like to begin by telling you a little bit about me, my background, my experiences, because all of that has shaped me in who I am, and logically, it likely has a bearing on the perspective that I'm about to offer you. As you can probably tell with an ethnic name like Bela Kovacs, which, by the way, both are Hungarian names, Bela being a masculine, I am a first-generation American and proud of it. There's no translation for my name, spelled with one letter L, not Bella. It is common in Hungary. It is about as common as is the name John. Kovacs translates to Smith, so I'm basically a John Smith. I was born and raised in Phoenix, Arizona, to a German mother and a Hungarian father. When I was young, we would do a lot of camping in northern Arizona, and my upbringing, filled me with stories that I learned around the campfire about how bad things can get when the structures of society crumble around you. Fearful stories about my father as a young kid walking to school with friends in the freezing temperatures and deep snow and being frightened with terror when they came across one of their friends who had been tied to a telephone pole after being stripped naked, drenched in a bucket of water in sub-zero temperatures because he refused to cooperate with the Communist Party in order to turn in his own father for activities against the state. My father did not need to worry about such pressures to turn in his own father because the Communist Party had murdered him in 1942 when 2 Soviet soldiers saw him and my father exiting a church. My grandfather was a simple tailor by trade and taken away and executed. Their crime? They were Catholic. They attended Holy Mass. In a communist country, it is a crime to believe in God. At the time my father was 10 years old, he was left on his own to make his way back to tell his mother what happened. Their home was destroyed in the battles of World War II that raged between the Germans and the Soviets on their very own property. They took up their home in a wagon and traveled 30 kilometers away to a town where they would have support from other family. They received no such support because terrorism has a way of turning families against one another. My father was raised by the state that killed his own father. They dictated that he would be an engineer, but he had aspirations to be an architect. In a strange turn, he was able to convince the state that he would make a good architect, and so that's how he was trained. Years later, in 1956, at age 19, my father was obliged to serve in the Hungarian army to repay the state for educating him. That is when the Hungarian Revolution broke out. He was among the Hungarian freedom fighters and was involved in fighting with further loss of life. He and his companions made their way by train by cover of night and then jumped train and made their way to Austria, where they found a safe place to sell their uniforms, their munitions, their weapons, so they could purchase civilian clothes, chocolates, and cigarettes. They made their way back to Hungary to get their families. Upon arriving at home, my grandmother and my aunt, then 13, refused to go with him back to Austria. But my uncle, who was 10 years old, already trained in the communist ways, said, "You take me with you, I'll turn you in." So at age 19, my father found himself with a 10-year-old dependent and nothing but the clothes on their backs, and they made their way back to Austria. The only nation that was open to them was the United States of America. My father eventually got sponsored by a Hungarian veterinarian in Phoenix, Arizona, and he actually lived and slept in the dog kennels, earning pay to pay room and board for his brother to go to school with a family and live with a family. This experience caused my father to have deep respect for the institutions set in place here in America. And he passed that respect on to me through the stories that I heard. My father would often say to me how much he loved this country and how concerned he was that many Americans were unaware of the price that had been paid by so many, not only to seek freedom, but to actually keep it. As for the work experience that my father taught me, I learned that if I am to have anything, I have to earn it. I married at 22. I worked full-time night shifts while I attended college full-time during the day. My major was focused on architecture and engineering, so I have a foundation in mathematics and the science. In some lean years in the construction industry, my father convinced me to change my major away from architecture. So my major was focused on economics. I graduated from Arizona State University in 1984 with a Bachelor of Science in Economics, and at the time, we had 3 daughters. After graduating, I completed a management training program with the company I worked for, and then moved to the purchasing department as a buyer. My work experience encompasses experience as a corporate buyer, a senior buyer, a category manager, over the course of 20 years in 2 states with 2 Fortune 100 companies and 1 Fortune 500 company. Throughout that time, as the family grew, it necessitated that I take a second and even a third job in the evenings and on the weekends. This led me to attend night school to become licensed in real estate in Colorado. In 1999, I transitioned to become the Director of Purchasing for Spokane County, and I served in that capacity until January of 2018. In 2004, I obtained my license here in Idaho to sell real estate again, and later in 2005, I obtained my license in Washington State. With the ever-increasing needs of our family, I asked my wife, who was then pregnant with our 11th child, to get her real estate license, and she agreed. She became licensed in 2005, and with 11 children, she and I joked that we were top producers. John Butler had nothing on us. Living in Coeur d'Alene and commuting to Spokane each day, it took its toll after nearly 20 years. I calculated that I had spent approximately 3 years of my life commuting back and forth between Coeur d'Alene and Spokane. So I decided to make real estate a full-time gig. But after a short stint of that, I realized that I missed the daily interaction of the office environment and the dynamics and challenges of public service. So I began to look for opportunities to return to public service, which eventually led me to this opportunity when, with the unfortunate passing of our previous assessor, I applied and received the vote of confidence from the commissioners. My experience and skill sets that I have gained over the years are directly transferable to this opportunity as assessor. All of the economic theories and principles such as relative scarcity, supply and demand, its effects on prices, the substitution of goods, etc., that I learned by earning my degree in economics are all borrowed in the field of appraisal. Before I begin, I'd like to now focus on your questions. Before I begin, I wish to recognize the task placed upon you, the study commission members, and to recognize that it has not taken a little amount of your time and commitment. Without a doubt, your scarce time and dedication has drawn you away from your own personal affairs, and you are to be commended for your efforts. Taken at face value and at the plain meaning of the terms used, the 10 questions prepared by the study commission seek opinion. In a few of the questions, they actually say exactly that by directly asking me for my opinion. The outcome of the study commission is a matter of great impact and importance to the citizens and communities of Kootenai County, and for that reason it seems reasonable that it should not be based on the mere opinions of a few. My opinions on the topic do not matter. It is the opinion of the voters that matter. What does matter in the way that our form of government is the will of the people, particularly the will of the residents of Kootenai County, expressed in the form of the vote as they have done twice before. Therefore, I will refrain to the best of my ability from rendering my own personal opinion to the questions. As I speak, if I slip up in my manner of phrasing by using the words "in my opinion," please know in advance that it's a mere manner of speaking, and it's my intent to give you my responses based upon fact, history, and my experience. In assembling my thoughts, I reached out to the 44 other county assessors throughout the state of Idaho, and I provided them with these questions and asked for their responses. Along the way, some of what I will say might seem passionate. It may even seem like some remarks are pointed. It is not meant to be so. Please know that many remarks I make are not directed at anyone on this study commission. If some of my comments that follow seem passionate, I urge you to consider the sincerity of my intention aimed at preserving the hard fought-for elements of participatory government, a product born out of revolution and the strong yearning by the American people to be self-governing. So why are we here? To explore new forms of government? That response does not answer the question. Why are we here? We are here because we have participatory government. We have due process. We are here, you're all here, because we have that in front of us. So for now, I just ask that you please consider that as you go through your process. So let me talk a little bit about the duties of the assessor's office and its responsibilities and about the staff. Bear with me.
There it comes. Yeah, put off the mic.
Okay, so this PowerPoint was not designed for the study commission, so I'm going to skip through the non-relevant points. I'd like to just talk a little bit about the, there's my experience and qualifications. Bear with me as I get my bearing. Okay, so what does the assessor's office do? And I'm going to be focusing on the mission and mandate primarily for the appraisers, the property evaluation and assessment. There are 5 divisions in the assessor's office. Residential appraisal, and by the way, these numbers are a little bit out of date, so they're not quite accurate up to the current date. We have a residential appraisal division consisting of 15 appraisers, 1 manager, 1 comptroller, and an appraisal tech, and then 2 other appraisal techs. We have a commercial or specialized appraisal division consisting of, we have 1 vacant manager's position there. We have 2 full-time commercial appraisers, a mobile home appraiser, a timber ag appraiser, and 3 full-time tech appraisals. We have a mapping and land records division with 1 full-time manager, 1 surveyor, 5 full-time cadastral specialists, and 2 full-time cadastral techs. We have our administrative offices with a chief deputy assessor, an administrative manager, a secretary, and 1 customer service tech and 3 customer service clerks. Then we have vehicle licensing with 2 offices, 1 in Coeur d'Alene and Post Falls, 1 FT manager, the tier in Coeur d'Alene, and 2 assistant managers, and 18 full-time title clerks. And I think that number is not current. This is an overview of the duties and responsibilities of the assessor's office. The Idaho Association of Counties publishes and produces an Assessor Manual. It consists of 380 pages. It's available at that link. And by the way, that link is a not updated version. I've had trouble accessing. There's a more current version, and I was not able to find it. So that's the only link I have at this point in time. Primarily, there are 4 areas that the assessor is responsible for. The assessment and valuation of properties, all under Title 63 of the Idaho Code or statutes, which is considered the tax code. The vehicle licensing and titling and registration, which is under the section of Idaho statute referenced there, 49-401A and 49-501IC. Apparently, it was news to me that the assessor is responsible for assembling a list of the militia in case it's ever called up by the governor under Idaho Code 46-104. The titling and the registration of boats. That's a typo there. I apologize for that. For 67-7029. That's basically all I wanted to go through in the PowerPoint. So for this discussion, I will focus on the Assessor's Office of Assessing and Valuing Property. Idaho state law mandates that the assessment and valuation of property be performed only by personnel who have been certified as appraisers by the Idaho State Tax Commission, according to the strict and uniform standards adopted by the federal government, USPAP. Generally, personnel who are not certified cannot set values. The appraisers are held to strict standards and code of ethics under the Idaho Tax Commission rule, ADAPA 35.01.03. The standard is set by the International Association of Assessing Officers, IAAO, and it's called the Standard on Mass Appraisal of Real Property. That document itself incorporates by reference the USPAP standard. The Idaho tax rules consist of 136 pages of single-spaced type A size font text. The IAAO standard consists of 182 pages of rule in single-space type 7 sized font. The IAAO standard in turn incorporates, I mentioned that already, I apologize. The USPAP standard consists of 343 pages of rule in single-spaced 11-sized font. In its residential division, the Kootenai County Assessor's Office has 1 manager and 15 appraisers. I already mentioned that and I apologize. Multiple times each year and for each of the assessment roles, the entire assessor staff solemnly swears and signs an oath to that effect that they have diligently made inquiry and examination to ascertain all property within the county and assessed equally and uniformly and according to the best judgment, information, and belief, and according to the law, that they have faithfully discharged all of the duties imposed under the revenue laws and the rules. So I'm now at your question number 1, and I will not necessarily go through all these questions in order. Who in Kootenai County government has the big picture of where the county should be going and what priorities are? This question itself poses a number of questions, and the answer depends upon several factors and considerations. An answer to this question cannot be really given without considering a little history. Please bear with me as I present some further background before answering the question. The following are a few rhetorical considerations. Presumably, the big picture the study commission is referring to is a strategic plan. By conventional wisdom, a strategic plan cannot be considered without knowing the objective. So to answer this question, it's imperative to ask whether or not, another rhetorical question, what is the mission and mandate? What is the purpose of each elective office? For our purposes, for Idaho, the mission and mandate is established by the state constitution, Article 18, Section 5, wherein the state legislature has directed to establish a system of county government that is uniform throughout the state. I will not quote that section. The default system chosen by the Idaho State Legislature is the commission form of government that we currently have. Presently, all 44 counties employ this form of government. Some relevant facts. The U.S. Census Bureau identifies 3,142 geographies inclusive of active and non-active county governments. According to NACO, the National Association of Counties, there are a total of 3,069 active county governments across the 48 United States of America, and based on their 2010 figures, over 60% of these counties use a similar form of county government as we have here now, the 3-commission form of county government. This excludes the District of Columbia. It also, Connecticut, Rhode Island, and Massachusetts, and independent cities in Virginia do not have active county governments, according to NACO. There is likely a reason why a majority of the U.S. counties use the commission form of government. The commission form of county government dates back to approximately the year 1682, and it's generally attributed to William Penn, the founder of Pennsylvania. Penn's commission model of county government became the predominant form of county government in early America and expanded west as Americans had a strong desire to elect their own leaders. Penn's form of commission county government called for the at-large election of commissioners and other officers such as the justices of the peace, sheriff, prosecuting attorney, clerk, coroner, treasurer, and assessor. Since the names of the candidates on the offices appeared on a single roll across a printed ballot, these other elected officials were referred to as row officers. The chief attractiveness of having the separate election of so many officials made for diffused authority and accountability, each one acting as a check on the authority of another. While each of the elected officials in some way serve as a check against the overreach of authority by the commissioners, in a fiscal sense, so too the commissioners serve as a check against the overreach of authority by the elected officials, primarily through control of the budget. This feature of checks and balances was the primary influencing factor that caused this form of county government to expand not only to the west, but back to the eastern counties of the original states. For Idaho, the mission and mandate for any strategic plan is for each of the respective elective officers. It's for them to decide, as further codified in the Idaho Constitution and by the statutes of the state legislature. For our purposes, the mission and mandate is established also by Article 18, Section 6, which I will not go into and read. I'd like to talk a little bit about what the state statutes say about the various elected officers. The sheriff is addressed by Chapter 22 of Title 31, prosecuting attorney, Chapter 26, Title 31, and also by applicable IDAPA. County clerk, as set forth in Chapter 10, Title 1, Idaho Code, Chapter 7, Title 31, Chapter 23, Title 31, Idaho Code, and Chapter 24, Title 31, Idaho Code, and applicable administrative rule. The coroner, as set forth in Chapter 28, Title 31, Idaho Code. The treasurer is as set forth in Chapter 1 of Title 14, Idaho Code, Chapters 15 and 21, Title 31, Idaho Code, and Title 63, Idaho Code, and applicable IDAPA. The assessor is as set forth in Title 63, the tax statutes. Each of these officers has a primary role to perform. That is their mission and mandate. Accordingly, it is up to each elected official to identify the big picture of their strategic plan to the mission and mandate as prescribed for their respective offices by the state legislature. In a general sense, each elected official pursues their statutory mandate and develops a big picture. Sorry, that's a repeat. This, of course, must be done by each elected official in harmony with each of the other respective elected officials. The final end is the common good of the people. The mission and mandate of the sheriff is not that of the commissioners, of the prosecuting attorney, it's not of the commissioners. Same for the clerk, same for the coroner, same for the treasurer, and same for the assessor. Therefore, the big picture as a whole of where the county is going is necessarily made up of the constituent parts. It involves each elected official developing the big picture for their office and also working collaboratively, but within the boundaries of their respective authority for a cooperative big picture and for the benefit of the community. I have listened to the statements made by various others who have come before the study commission to say that there has been no strategic planning since, for various causes, such as the change in the Board of County Commissioners or because the county no longer has a manager. I don't believe that, I agree with those statements. I don't believe that or see that as a weakness or a flaw in county government. The correct answer and the reason is that because of the strength of the current form of county government, it is because of the strength of the current form of government that the various elected officials are independent and that they are free to set their strategic plan for their departments. There is nothing that precludes any of the elected officials from developing their own strategic plan. In fact, it is their duty and their obligation to do so. The elected officials are not the victims of the commissioners. There are many aspects of a department's daily and annual operations for which the elected official as an administrator can develop a strategic action plan. Not everything depends upon funding. For example, the assessor's office is mandated by Idaho state law to have a 5-year plan. That's Idaho Code 63-314. The assessor is obliged by statute to visit every parcel in the county at least once in 5 years, 20%, in order to assess and appraise values. The assessor needs a plan to accomplish that in the course of 5 years. That is a plan. This itself is not necessarily a strategic plan, but it is inextricably linked to a plan. I'll give you another example. One issue that I'm dealing with today is the major loss of personnel. Under normal circumstances, every operation knows that they must deal with the eventual replacement of personnel. It is inevitable that employees, workers, and managers will eventually resign or retire, find greener pastures, get married, and decide to devote their time to raising a family, or may unfortunately pass away due to illness or injury from an accident. What we do know is that life will happen, and there is the natural expansion and contraction of things. Consequently, there is the need to plan for attrition, to cultivate and train new workers, to rise into the ranks, to be ready to step in when a vacancy occurs. In a word, it's contingency planning. Such contingency planning, such succession planning is a part of strategic planning. It's absolutely necessary. Another aspect of strategic planning is to document process flows in the form of standard operating procedures, and even re-engineer and improve processes. This is necessary because, again, we know that eventually all people will leave the organization. If the processes are built upon people, and if there are no established standard operating procedures in place, then it can significantly impact the operations when retirements occur. Certainly, these aspects are strategic to the operations of the department, and that's why they're necessary. Another aspect is the eventual obsolescence of current systems and the planned replacement of those systems. We all have heard stories in the news of when and how Microsoft has announced that they will no longer support Windows XP or Windows 7. This is a reality for software makers. We know it will happen, but we don't know when. Nonetheless, we need to plan for it, and that is an aspect of succession planning or strategic planning. As a former purchasing director for county government, I have personally been involved in the drafting of technical expectations, scopes of work, and the negotiation of contracts for complex and sophisticated proprietary systems and custom off-the-shelf systems. I know firsthand that the contracts for these systems need to anticipate system updates, patches, fixes, system refreshes with the development of new technologies and to incorporate those new technologies without the need to declare a sole source and without the need to go back for another competitive bid. This may well be the very meaning of strategic planning, to be able to anticipate and account for such things before they occur, and to have a contract in place that anticipates them and provides for the continuity of operations. These aspects of the strategic plan are challenging even in perhaps a more normal year, maybe a good year, to say nothing of a more complex year that involves the loss of leadership, the unexpected loss of leadership, closures due to a COVID-19 pandemic, civil unrest, and unprecedented growth due to massive and unanticipated migration to our area. It is true that in many cases a strategic plan will necessitate a budgetary infusion of funds, and yes, for that, the elected officials are all dependent upon the commissioners. It is the commissioners that approve or disapprove funding and expenditures. But the reality is this: if another elected official, say an assessor, puts together a solid strategic plan that is aimed at addressing the various issues of his or her office, but repeatedly the commissioners deny funding, then there will be a very important trail pointing to the cause for not being able to accomplish the strategic objective. The nature of the functions of the assessor's office is such that the commissioners must provide the funding necessary to accomplish the mission and mandate. State law provides for that. Before I finish with question 1, it's noteworthy to mention that in Idaho state law concerning counties, under Title 31, each one of the various chapters, the chapters that you are all considering, Chapter 52, 53, 55, 56, and 58, that pertain to possible other forms of government, they all refer to the same statutes for the official duties of the public offices of the sheriff, the prosecuting attorney, the county clerk, the coroner, the treasurer, and the assessor. Each one of the chapters on other forms of county government all refer back to these same statutory responsibilities, regardless of the form of government. So regardless if the form of government changes, the sheriff will need to perform his duties and so forth. In considering any of these optional forms of government, the key question in light of all the expense and effort are the following. And to make no mistake, this effort has involved considerable expense and effort by the county. What will have changed after the time, the expense, and the effort? What will have been gained? The answer, I believe, is nothing. The statutes are the same. The mission and mandate is the same. This also begs the question, what will you have lost? The most obvious answer, in my view, is participatory government. The additional aspect of having elected officials is each one of you can run for office. That's participatory government. To change that, you can no longer run for your office. I'll move on now to my response to question number 2. What are the strengths, in my opinion, what are the strengths and weaknesses of Kootenai County's current government structure as it relates to my office? If possible, please explain by reference to specific examples of such strengths and weaknesses. Here, the question directly asks for my opinion, and I will attempt to refrain from offering my opinion, but I will respond to the question as a student of history and considering it in the light of what we know about human action and in particular how that relates to the assessor's office. First, I'm going to provide a general response and then go into a little more history, and I will finish off with the response to this question with a particular example of how it relates to the assessor's office. The current strength of the governmental structure is the independence of the elected officials that they have from the commissioners. In this way, the elected officials are answerable to the state and to the electorate. If the commissioners are acting in a manner contrary to state law, as it pertains, say, to an office of another elected official, then the affected elected official has the independence to stand up and take issue and even to pursue legal action. Elected officials are representative of and answerable to the people, whereas appointed department heads are not directly answerable to the people, but only answerable to their employer, the manager who hires or fires them. Converting the elected official to appointed positions will only serve to empower, insulate, and shield the commissioners at the loss of a representative and participatory form of government. If appointed, there would be no protection or remedies for an assessor to question or challenge the actions of the commissioners. Understanding these pressures of public office, decisions would likely no longer be made on the basis of principle. For example, in the assessor's office, the principle is the matter of fair and equitable assessment of properties. But it would rather and likely be made on the basis of preserving one's own position and career. A further strength is that the current form of 3 commissioners are full-time. By having the commissioners as full-time positions, their loyalties and commitment and interests are not divided. The issues that the commissioners must deal with are numerous and complex, and it would not be in the best interest of the public to have commissioners who are part-time with interests that lie elsewhere. It's just not typical of human nature. If the commissioners' positions were part-time, then most people who could serve would likely have to maintain a full-time employment elsewhere, and most people likely would not or could not devote the necessary time to perform the duties and roles required of the office. No man can serve 2 masters. The public deserves better than mediocre and part-time performance. Additionally, moving from 3 full-time commissioners to 7 or 5 will increase the cost of county government. You'd have to multiply the factor of processing payroll for 7 or 5 as opposed to 3 individuals, plus all the other factors that go into multiplying the number of personnel. It would dilute the power of the voters in that each commissioner would be answerable to for fewer votes per each district. Increasing the number of commissioners from 3 to 5 will be a weakness in the form of government from the standpoint that it will give the commissioners an undesirable opportunity to engage in consensus building outside of public view, since several sets of 2 commissioners could privately or secretively meet without creating quorum. They could then discuss important matters. In turn, 2 other commissioners could meet also privately and secretly without forming a quorum to again discuss the same important matters. The consequence of that is there's consensus building in the background outside of public view. One criticism I've heard of the current form of county government is that it's slow, inefficient, and clunky. I've heard that some have made such anecdotal claims, but I have not seen any specific instances where such claims have been supported by specific examples. Many compare county government to private sector corporations. And by the way, on my previous point, I would like to make note of the Idaho State Attorney General has a pamphlet on their website on the Idaho open meeting law. On page 8 of that pamphlet, it has a question number 10. Since any meeting of 2 county commissioners constitutes a quorum under Idaho law, are county commissioners prohibited from having any contact with each other outside of a duly organized meeting? Their answer: While it is the opinion of the Attorney General that the open meeting law must be complied with whenever a quorum of the members of a governing body of a public agency meet to decide or deliberate on matters which are within the ambit of official business, this office does not believe that the legislature intended for the open meeting law to act as a bar on all communications between individual county commissioners outside of open meetings. The purpose of my bringing up that point is not to support or to encourage meetings outside of public and open meetings. I believe that's where they should occur. Another criticism that I have heard is that they say that a private sector corporation CEOs can freely meet in order to discuss important matters and make decisions on important matters. CEOs are not constrained by being required to always meet publicly in open meetings. I believe such a criticism is false. And that's where I wanted to reference this, the Idaho Attorney General. So make no mistake, I'm not here to suggest as a matter of practice that commissioners ought to be meeting privately and outside of open meetings. The point is simply,
Hold it down.
the point is simply this: the primary reasons advanced as an argument in favor of changing the form of government is false. In that case, it is false that a commissioner requires the flexibility to meet privately. I've already gone through that example. As far as comparing county government to private sector, government is necessarily deliberative in its processes. It involves considering all sides of the issues in a public and open meeting. The first thing to bear in mind is that a private sector corporation does not have that same requirement to be scrutinized by the public eye. Representative form of government is not secretive and should not be secretive. It is necessarily subject to public scrutiny. These are the issues which the checks and balances of public scrutiny are designed to keep in line for transparency and accountability. For a better understanding of how these structures relate to county government, a bit more history may be illustrative. In the adolescence of our nation, and because the specific roles and powers of many officers were not explicitly defined, counties functioned both as local governments and as arms of their respective states. These are in the early days of the formation of this nation. Consequently, the roles of officers were not infrequently confused, and there were not a few abuses in power. In the mid-1800s, there occurred in the U.S. a series of court decisions that clarified counties' status for the first time, and these created precedents that would serve as a restraint on county authority. The most prominent of these court decisions came in Iowa in 1868 by Justice John F. Dillon of the Iowa Supreme Court, a prolific writer and a well-known and esteemed authority on government and municipal law. Because counties are creatures of the state, Judge John Dillon insisted that local governments are entirely subject to the will of the state legislature. Because the decision made by Judge John Dillon in Merriam versus Moody Executors came to be known as what is now called Dillon's Rule, and it clarified that county governments have only three types of powers, and I will read those in a minute. As I read the decision of Dillon's Rule, I ask that you keep in mind the considerations of due process, accountability, and transparency in government actions and decision-making. The decision by Judge John Dillon setting forth the limitation of powers of county government reads as follows, quote, "It is a general and undisputed proposition of law that a municipal corporation possesses and can exercise the following powers and no others. First, those granted in express words. Second, those necessarily or fairly implied in or incident to the powers expressly granted. Third, those essential to the accomplishment of the declared object and the purposes of the corporation. Not simply convenient, but indispensable." Here's the kicker. Any fair, reasonable, substantial doubt concerning the existence of the power is resolved by the courts against the corporation, and the power is denied. Thus, the three types of authority and powers of counties are, as I'm not going to repeat that. It is this last sentence of Dillon's Rule that places the vice on county authority, and it is perhaps the reason that many accuse county of being slow, clunky, and inefficient. The county and county officers are creatures of the state, and therefore their authority is limited to what the state has defined and created. By the turn of the 20th century, Dillon's Rule was firmly established as the basic law of county government, and the authorities of counties throughout the nation were consequently more accountable because of it. According to NACO, a total of 39 states in the U.S. are considered undeniably Dillon's Rule states. Only 10 states are considered not to be Dillon Rule states: Alaska, Iowa, Massachusetts, Montana, New Jersey, New Mexico, Ohio, Oregon, South Carolina, and Utah. According to NACO, Florida is unclear because it has conflicting statutes. There is available from NACO a document that's all about Dillon's Rule, and it lists the states that are subject to Dillon's Rule. This brings me back to the criticism often made of current form of county government, that it's slow, inefficient, and clunky. That in comparing county government to private sector corporations, it has been said that CEOs or leaders are not hampered or prevented by prohibitions to meet in order to discuss and make decisions on important matters. It is a lack of understanding of the rudimentary processes and differences in organizational structure and their purposes, which lead people to make such false comparisons that counties should be more like private sector corporations. Let me be clear, I am not saying that counties should be inefficient. Simply put, corporations are oligarchies. An oligarchy is ruled and controlled by a few. And in history, when it was applied to government, it has more often than not been associated with control and corruption. Local government was not intended by the forefathers to be oligarchical in form. Government under the American way is necessarily deliberative in its processes. It has to be. It must be if it's to be accountable to the people and if the voices of the few are to be heard. Because the decisions and actions of government impact the lives and livelihood of the private citizens everywhere, there is much in government that is necessarily deliberative. To change zoning laws or to enact laws, there must be public hearings, debate, and testimony. To adopt a budget, the various elected officials must present their needs. There will be public hearings. Deliberations are held again. The public has a chance to weigh in, and budgets are then adopted. To make an arrest, there must be an investigation, probable cause discovered, and in some cases a warrant issued by a judge. To have a trial and a verdict, there will be the selection of jurors, the hearing of evidence, and a trial. To have a public procurement, there will be the vetting of vendors, the written specifications and a scope of work is prepared, a competitive bid is issued with a public bid opening, tabulation, and the award of a contract to the lowest responsive bidder. To have an election, there will be campaigning, debates, and election. To equalize assessments, there is the mailing of assessment notices, the opportunity to appeal to be heard by the Board of Equalization, and the possibility of further appeals to the Board of State Tax Appeals, and ultimately, if it is not considered fair and equitable, if there is a shifting of tax burden, the matter could be referred to the court for decision. The various different forms of county government by the elimination of elected offices is a move in the direction away from representative form of government. By eliminating the election of the various elected officials and making them appointed positions, it creates a buffer and an insulation, and the former elected officer is no longer directly accountable to the people, but to who has hired him. If the public objects to a decision a commissioner makes, then, I'm sorry, I'm getting mixed up here. By eliminating the election of the various elected officials and making them appointment, it creates a buffer, but, sorry about that. In the context of the task before the study commission, if it has not done so already, it would be beneficial for the study commission to review some history on the topic. The comparison of government with business is, again, not valid. The reality is that the constraints on authority are what provide for the checks and balances, for the transparency and the accountability in government. I'm going to shorten this. Something I have often heard in my experience in government is that government should think outside the box. What such critics more likely mean when they say that is they expect government to be efficient. Of course, we all want that, and efficiencies are accomplished through honing processes, eliminating non-value added steps, and doing so all the while in observing and preserving the very reasons for why government needs to remain fair and equitable. Otherwise, it risks becoming tyrannical and despotic. Sure, we all want our government to be efficient, and that is best accomplished when there are checks on authority so that the work of county government is handled in an accountable manner with appropriate checks and balances against the abuse of power and collusion. Some might object that a form of the commission county government from the year 1682 was a long, long time ago, perhaps too long ago. A lot has changed since then, and there have been a lot of advancements in the world. The answer boils down to a matter of government by the people and for the people, combined with the fact that there is one thing that has not changed in thousands of years. In all the time, the frailty of human nature has not changed. Greed and corruption, abuses of power, are still alive and well today. The influences on human actions such as avarice, greed, corruption, favoritism, cronyism, pick whatever term you like, have not changed. The propensity of mankind and these flawed traits of human character remain present today and just as relevant as they ever have been. The very concept of what we're doing now, following Robert's Rules of Order, reflects that. With the foregoing in mind, I'll apply this now to the assessor's office. For the assessor's office, the end goal, the duty to perform for the public, is striving to achieve the fair and equitable assessment of values of property in the county. Some of the more obvious purposes of government are the policing and public safety, state, national defense, protection of natural resources, public health, wastewater treatment, public right-of-ways, roads, highways, bridges, safe drinking water, zoning, as well as serving as the arbiter and settler of disputes. Therefore, it is a necessary and practical reality that a society needs revenue and to properly operate and function. The means to generate such revenue is through taxation and fees. Most people recognize that there is a moral obligation to pay their fair share of taxes in order for society to properly function. Most people also recognize that it is a moral obligation of the government to distribute the tax load as fairly and as justly as possible. The practical method is to make the taxes proportionate to the citizens' ability to pay. How to arrive at the practical method is beyond the scope of the discussion here, but for our purposes, we will consider as a starting point the system as it now exists without entering into debate on the merits of the system. We all use roads. We all want safe drinking water, bridges that don't fall down, public safety. It is therefore reasonable to distribute the burden of taxation as fairly as reasonably possible. It is also recognized that in society, some individuals will be unable to pay their share or might not be able to pay any of what might be considered their fair share. Some may have no means at all, yet society still needs to function. Therefore, in Idaho, the system of taxation is called a progressive system, meaning that it provides for a taxing in proportion to an ability to contribute to the public good. Accordingly, it is a system based upon the assessed value of property, which this value is determined by market forces, and it is what is called market value. A willing buyer, a willing seller, agreeing to a price, neither of whom are acting out of compulsion. Properties are to be assessed within plus or minus 10% of market value. So in considering what market value is as being 100%, then according to the Idaho State Tax Commission rules, the assessed values of properties could statistically be in the range of 90 to 110% of market value. To calculate the share of tax responsibility, the assessed value of the property is multiplied by a levy rate for the various jurisdictions that the property is located in. The actual levy rate is specific to the area where the property is located. I'm running long here and I apologize. I'm gonna cut it short. Errors can occur, but rarely do happen. That is why the assessor's office takes care each year to meet with the public to go over their information and to make adjustments before it goes to the Board of Equalization. From my perspective, in the short time that I was here, I have served as county assessor. It appears that the commissioners do take their responsibility very seriously as they sit as the Board of Equalization to hear appeals made by property owners. In the past, and I'm talking previous boards, board members have been receptive and sensitive to the property owner's appeal, which often is an emotional appeal to ask for their property taxes to be reduced and which simply does not meet the necessary burden of proof to warrant reducing the assessed value and thereby reduce the property taxes for that property owner. Despite the fact that the owner did not provide the burden of proof, the BOE has in the past moved to reduce the assessed value in some cases. The consequence of such a change actually shifts the burden of tax away from that particular property owner to all other property owners. The reality is that in such cases, the new lower value set by the BOE is arbitrary because the number is arrived at without adhering to the established methodologies, ethics, and accepted appraisal standards. The same can also happen when a certain large commercial property owner files an appeal and effectively pressures the board to reduce their assessed value. There are some commercial property owners that file an appeal each year, even though they don't have the burden of proof. Thus, the burden of taxes are shifted to others in a manner that is not fair and equitable. Depending upon who files the appeal, in some cases, the shifting of tax burden is away from one residential property owner to all others. And in other cases, it's a shifting of tax burden away from large commercial property owners to all residential property owners. One of the things that constituents can do is to attend BOE hearings, and if they see such things happening, they too can file an appeal. But in some situations where a past BOE was empathetic and receptive to an appellant, the shifting has occurred. The issue is the high standard of fairness and equity, which is of such great magnitude that in such cases where the shifting has occurred, the assessor can and has filed an appeal with the Board of State Tax Appeals and even has filed lawsuit in district court against the BOE. When I took office last year, there were 3 such lawsuits pending. It is difficult, if not impossible, to imagine that any assessor who was appointed would have the strength of character and tenacity to stand in opposition to their employer by filing a lawsuit against them. Rather, it is more likely that an appointed assessor would be swayed by a board of county commissioners if they were his or her employer, or if the assessor was hired by a manager or an executive who served at the pleasure of the board. It is more likely that the board of commissioners or the hiring manager or hiring executive would not have the same level of commitment to these standards of appraisal methodologies and the call for fairness to be statutorily correct. Rather, what we would likely have seen instead is an assessor who would be insulated from the process and from being directly accountable to the electorate. That's question 2. There are 10 questions. How is it that you or your office collaborates or coordinates with the Board of County Commissioners and other row officials or offices in the county? As the assessor, I meet with the board and with all other elected officials in order to dutifully carry out the functions of the office. The interaction and collaboration is not limited to these monthly meetings, but is ongoing. In the normal course of duties, it necessitates various departments to collaborate and work together. The assessors with the Board of County Commissioners, the Auditor's Office, and all of the elected officials, as well as the non-elected, information technology, community development, parks and recreation, and so forth. Excuse me. In order to meet the requirements for open and public meetings, the board has a routine schedule for the various meetings, such as status update meetings for ongoing business, business meetings to make awards and execute contracts, the regular standing human resources meetings, and so forth. The departments cooperate with the board to apply their agendas to the board's schedule and calendar to meet and discuss issues. Question 4. What do you do to educate yourself and expand the necessary skills to best meet the needs of Kootenai County residents? As you know, I am new to the position of assessor. First, and in addition to having a Bachelor of Science of Economics, I have historically fulfilled the continuing education requirements to maintain the professional certifications that I have held. I hold the CPM, Certified Purchasing Manager, with the Institute of Supply Management, the CPPO, which is the Certified Public Procurement Officer with the National Institute of Governmental Purchasers, and the Certified Material Resource Professional with the American Hospital Association. I plan to maintain, going forward, the CPM and the CPPO. Based upon my nearly 20 years of prior experience in county government as a purchasing director and administrator, I have extensive experience in all the administrative matters required at the department head level of county government. As a former director of central services for purchasing, I have an excellent understanding of how departments operate and the need for cross-functional teams to accomplish organizational objectives. I am an adept researcher of statutes and code, policies and procedures, and I am experienced in drafting code, ordinances, and preparing policy and standard operating procedures. My experience and my history demonstrates that I am all in and committed to the positions I have held, and I will do the same as the assessor for Kootenai County. I have held a license for real estate in 3 states and have completed the necessary ongoing educational requirements to maintain those licenses. I no longer am licensed in Washington or Colorado. And my license with the state of Idaho has been placed on inactive status. This experience and these skill sets I have already used for the benefit of Kootenai County, and I will continue to do so for years to come. In the short 1 year that I've been in office, the standard orientation that the state of Idaho provides to newly elected officials, particularly to assessors, was not offered this past year because of the COVID-19 pandemic. Despite that, I have begun taking courses, and I will plan to continue doing so until I have earned the credentials to become a certified appraiser with the Idaho State Tax Commission. Being new to Kootenai County, I've lived here for 22 years, but in the sense of the assessor being new to Kootenai County, and in the wake of a rather tumultuous year, I need to first focus on a number of pressing matters that need my attention. But given the proper timing that will permit me to first address these numerous issues, I then plan to eventually work towards earning a designation from the IAAO, such as the AAS, the Assessment Administration Specialist. The Idaho State Tax Commission offers coursework annually, as well as the IAAO offers courses for assessors and appraisers. I will be engaged in taking those courses as well. In addition, I will be involved in meeting with the Chamber of Commerce for the various local cities and similar other local groups and organizations. I am and will remain active in the IAAO and in the Idaho Association of Counties and the Idaho Association of County Assessors. Through the IAC and the IACA, I am active in the legislative process, and I will work to address public policy issues that are in the best interest of the citizens I serve in Kootenai County. I am interested in the principles of lean manufacturing and Six Sigma. I am interested in the prospect of implementing such programs here in Kootenai County as the assessor to create a performance management plan for the office and to routinely report on the progress of operations of the office. At the appropriate juncture in the near future, it is also my desire to complete the high performance leadership course offered through NACO, the NACO Leadership Academy. Question 5. Who does the work in your office? What is the span of control? What are your specific responsibilities as compared to those of your deputy? Who in your office supervises and manages the line staff? The assessor's office is not an island unto itself. The work is accomplished by the assessor's office. It is a team effort that not only involves the staff at all levels, but which also involves the various other county departments already mentioned, plus the various state agencies as well as local cities and other various taxing districts and URDs. This involves meetings and constant communications and more meetings. It involves skillful application of project management skill sets. More importantly, it involves defining roles and responsibilities and the appropriate setting of boundaries, as well as authorizing levels of delegation and responsibility to staff, and then following up and monitoring progress. How do you hire your deputy? Do you search for outside of the country? Do you look county? Do you look for specific skills that complement yours, or just someone to execute your requests? I hired the chief deputy by updating the job description first and involving my staff. I then cast the widest net possible. I looked both within and outside of the county. The circumstances that we have with the growth that we've experienced and the rising home prices have created rather unique situations and circumstances. I've had more than one individual that has either scoffed at the salary that we offered for the chief deputy and then withdrawn their application, or people that have come and that have actually withdrawn their application because they discovered they could not afford to live here. I ended up hiring a person locally who has qualified skill sets. Question 7, as an insider doing your job, what do you believe are the operational pitfalls versus your elected position? I believe I've already answered that question. I would like to add to that, however, that a few people that have come before me to talk to this study commission have mentioned the structure of Ada County, where that county has an executive or manager position, but not one of those as envisioned by 31-52 or 31-53. Instead of an executive manager as envisioned by those statutes, it is conceivable that the Kootenai County Commissioners could create a position to help manage the administrative matters under the purview of the commissioners. I have learned that this county once before has attempted this sort of thing, and that some have said it has failed. I am not familiar with those particular experiences, so I cannot speak to the reasons why it failed. But I do have experience at Spokane County. This study commission need not go so far as Ada County to obtain an idea of what that might look like for this county. And by the way, I'd like to put in a caveat. There should be taken into consideration the demographical differences, the population differences, and all the other differences in terms of state law. Spokane County is a different area than Kootenai County. So what works for Spokane does not necessarily or would not necessarily work for Kootenai County. The position of county administrator is an approach that worked well, in my opinion, when I worked for Spokane County. In my experience at Spokane County, the key reasons for why it worked well there are these. The individual who occupied the office, initially the county administrator, but then changed to a CEO position, was Marshall Farnell. He was the CEO for Spokane County for the time that I worked there and long before and after. Not after, he retired in 2017. Marshall Farnell was by far the right individual for the job. He approached every situation with a level head and fairness. He was not power hungry. He showed respect for every person with whom he came into contact. Marshall Farnell is a rare individual that we seldom see, but it is critically important to have the right person for the job. And for Spokane County, Marshall Farnell was that man. He brought harmony to the organization. The other reason I believe it worked is the definition of the roles of the position. You have to define the job description. You have to define the boundaries of authority. More importantly, the necessary level of authority must be defined and given, and the commissioners must not undermine it. The last reason I will give is that I would also attribute it to another person, and that was the Spokane County Chief Deputy Civil Attorney Jim Amacio, who all the remarks that I made concerning Marshall Farnell, I would say the same for him. These two leaders were the fiber of Spokane County, and based on my experience, they are the reason for the kind of stability that Spokane County has enjoyed for over 40 years during their time there. Some have suggested that a CEO or a county administrator here would create or could create a separation between the commissioners and the department heads. In my experience, that did not happen at Spokane County, and it was all in the way the role was defined. In my experience, although as a director I was an appointed department head, and although I reported directly to the CEO, Marshall Farnell had the level of trust in me, and I had in him, that he never had any qualms with me going directly to the Board of County Commissioners on any topic or on any project. In fact, he encouraged me to do so. Marshall Farnell, as the CEO or administrator for Spokane County, did not insert himself between any department head that I'm aware of or any director and the commissioners. Furthermore, at Spokane County, each commissioner, as a separate organizational issue, each commissioner had their own executive assistant, which provided support to each county commissioner. Question 8. If not addressed by your preceding responses, why should your office remain an elected position as opposed to an appointed or hired position? I believe I've already answered that question, so I will skip on to the next one. Assuming Kootenai County voters approved a ballot measure to change your office from an elected position to an appointed one, what do you believe would be the immediate long-term impacts of such change? In addition, what effect do you believe this change will have on activities administered by your office in which the Kootenai County Board of Commissioners are involved? Example, developing budgets, human resource matters, risk management, contract solicitation, administration. Given the scope and magnitude, my answer is, given the scope and magnitude of the issues the department is currently facing, I firmly believe that such a change would be devastating to the operations of this office and the mission and mandate it is required to perform. There is a lot of change going on in the assessor's office now. We had the unexpected death of the previous assessor that significantly impacted personnel. We have systems that are antiquated and out of date, that are with undocumented processes that are manual and sometimes outside the system. I think it would be an extreme challenge for anyone walking in to be able to take on the reins and without skipping a beat. There is no roadmap for any new administrator, and the nature of the work, and the mature workforce of the staff who are poised and ready for retirement, I just think it would be catastrophic. There are many people that are on the verge of retirement. Stability is a good thing and has been a good thing for many years, but with the eventual retirement, there are issues that need to be addressed. What would be the impacts to cost and efficiency of your office in delivering services to the public? Costs are likely to go up, as I mentioned before. The single largest concern that I have for Kootenai County is what seems to be, in my opinion, a lack of commitment for past commissioners to support the needed systems. There are many systems that need to be addressed. Additionally, the lack of documented processes are a concern. How would it impact the accountability of my office to the public? I already addressed this. Additionally, I solicited, as I said before, the input of 44 various other county assessors, and I heard back from 40 of them. All were unanimous in their concerns that such a change would be a significant adverse impact to the accountability because of the necessary checks and balances on authority that would be eliminated. Last question was growth. In your opinion, what are the impacts of growth in Kootenai County on the administration of services provided for your office? Simple. Insufficient resources, staffing, systems, lack of documentation. It has had a tremendous impact. None of the impacts that I'm experiencing in the assessor's office were anticipated, nor, and many of them could not have been anticipated. Some, I will say, could have been anticipated by a strategic plan. In view of such growth, do you believe that the current structure of Kootenai County government is adequate to your office delivery of services to the public? Yes. In your opinion, what changes, if any, should be made to the structure of Kootenai County government to facilitate your office in delivering services to the public? None. End. That's the end of my presentation.
Thank you, sir. It is AIDS. Knock it off. It's 10 after 7. Typically, we try to take a break around 7 o'clock. Do we want to take a break before we go into questioning?
Please.
We have a 10-minute break. We'll reconvene at 7:20.
And I was here when we had the manager in the past. That's the advantage of being here so long. And it did work efficiently with three full-time commissioners. And where the rub really came was we had some new commissioners came in, and as he should, the commissioner or the manager told them no, and that didn't sit well with one of them, and they ended up dismissing it and doing away with the position. So sometimes you have to stand up to your boss, and it cost him his job.
Okay.
But I think that manager position would work and is probably necessary for the just the consistency that we see, or lack of consistency that we currently see.
Do you have, and I realize you haven't held the commissioner role
Correct.
yourself. Do you have any sense of whether, part-time can obviously range considerably from 2 hours a week to 97% of a full-time could be
Sure.
considered still part-time. But if we were to say half-time, just as a starting point, do you have any sense of whether that would be sufficient to be adequately informed and be an effective commissioner?
You know, it would really be hard to say without having sat in that seat, as you said.
Okay.
I've never done that. I know that several other counties around the state do have part-time commissioners. And, you know, a lot of them are ranchers or farmers, and it is a collateral duty, you know, that they've chosen to take on as a part-time role. I don't know that Kootenai County is ready for that. I think Kootenai County has too much going on for the board to be part-time.
Okay, thank you.
Tamara?
Thank you for both of you for being here and for your time and your wonderful presentations. You mentioned that in your role working in both the city council and as an elected official, and you briefly mentioned that cities are different. Could you go into a little more, the city government versus obviously the county government, could you go into a little more detail of how you perceive those differences or what you perceive them to be?
Sure. Cities are optional. We'll start there. No community has to incorporate. That's a choice that they make. Counties are mandated by the state constitution. If a city incorporates, they can choose whether or not they have a police department, or they can choose to rely on the county sheriff to provide their law enforcement services. They can choose to have a fire department. Little counties don't have to have a fire department, or they can choose to go with a fire district. Most counties in Idaho run road and bridge, unlike Kootenai County, where there are 4 separate highway districts. A city can contract that out and don't have to have their own department. And I look at, say, the city of Fernand Village. Nice little community down at the east end of Sherman, less than 200 residents. They don't have a water system. They buy their water system from the city of Coeur d'Alene. They don't have a sewer system. They also contract with the city of Coeur d'Alene for that. That's a choice they get to make. But in the county, we are mandated to regulate those things through the health district, through septic systems, or you know, clean water systems. As Bella said, you know, that's some of the basic functions of government. Make sure we have clean drinking water, and our wastewater gets treated somewhere, so we have clean drinking water. Cities, that's an option. Cities have the option of how big their government can be. It can be a 4-member council with a mayor. It can be a 6-member council with a mayor. Counties is pretty well set in stone. Cities can have a multitude of department heads. Counties are pretty well set in stone. You know, our elected officials are set by the state constitution. I mean, I could go into the minutia if you'd like, but there's quite a difference there between cities and counties.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Bruce?
Yes, I do have a question. Thank you both for being here. I very much appreciate it and the time you put into your opening statements. There's some folks on the commission who have suggested that because the positions you hold are elected, and the possibility exists that a recommendation may come where your position would be hired, that of course you're going to say your position should remain elected. because it's self-serving. So the question is kind of geared towards both of you. What would you say to those commissioners that think you might have a bias already in preserving the elected position?
Bailey, do you want to start?
I'm processing.
Well, I'll start. I don't have a dog in the fight. I retired. But I know that the check and balance that I had the opportunity or was required to do in my role as the sheriff. I know that it went beyond that. It was even in my role as an advisor to my previous sheriffs, where I said, no, this is not within the scope of the county commissioners, or this is not within the scope of the treasurer. This is your responsibility. And then let them take that battle back to the other elected official. It's not self-serving for me at all. I don't have the dog in the fight.
It's a convenient argument for any such commissioner to make.
And I mean commission members in here
Okay,
who made that statement.
Study commission.
Okay.
Study commission.
it's still a convenient argument to make. When I gave my presentation, I recited that I gave my response based upon surveying 44 county assessors. So it wasn't just my opinion. I reached out to NACO, 3,069 counties, of which 60% have the form of county government we have. It's in the numbers. I would encourage this study commission to reach out to NACO. They are in process of doing a study, of updating their numbers now. See what the numbers say. Why restrict yourself to the microcosm of the very narrow one or two counties or just this state? I also reviewed the history, and I'm a believer in history. I believe we can learn lessons from history. And I believe the founding fathers of this country knew what they were doing. They were smart men. I would encourage the study commission, I'm not sure if you're familiar with the Federalist Papers, to read Federalist number 10, number 47, and number 51.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Bryant? Certainly.
Sheriff, I still think of you that way, sorry.
That's okay.
You were in favor of a manager position working with the Board of County Commissioners. And you indicated one of the things about that position that you favored was that it would provide some level of consistency over time.
Right.
As I understand it, the manager would primarily be engaged in an administrative function. So I'm just wanting to know if you can explain how that would provide for consistency over time, since they're basically dealing with the day-to-day running of operation. Whereas I see it, the consistency be more of a policy type consideration.
Thank you. I think that the manager has the ability to amass some corporate history and provide a consistency so that we don't continue to repeat. I guess I'm kind of like Bela, I like history. Don't repeat the mistakes of those who've preceded us. It was an advantage I had in the sheriff's office as I came up through the ranks. I'd worked for 3 previous sheriffs before I became the sheriff. I knew where we'd been, and I could set the direction from that. And I didn't have to repeat the mistakes of those who preceded me. And not that I didn't make my own, but I didn't have to do that. I think a manager helps that because we see a pretty healthy turnover in county commissioners over the years. I think I've worked under 18 different commissions during my career. And that's a lot of people, and that's a lot of inconsistency. Thank you.
Phil?
Yeah, this is a question actually for both of you, but you can kind of go at it however you choose. First of all, thank you for being here. I think we've had 5 of the row officers here and 1 former row officer here. And I have to say, for people who had no qualifications to be required, we've done pretty good in Kootenai County with the people that we've actually elected. And that may be luck of the draw, I don't know, but it has worked out pretty well. And I'm a little more concerned right now, less about the accountability to the public as within the system itself. As a police officer, a police chief, certain expertise you have that we don't expect any of our county commissions to have.
Correct.
And your job is to enforce the law.
Correct.
In your case, Bella, you have a law that you have to enforce. It says you have to make sure you have the assessments right and so on. So you kind of know what you need. Well, I need more people to do this. I need more people out on the street. I mean, you run 24-hour shift. And when it comes time to do a budget, you got to think, well, I know I need another X dollars here. But you don't make that decision. You present it to the commission, and they decide. Is there a breakdown there or something to be done to ensure that your budget and your budget are commensurate with the needs that are being generated by the community, particularly a growing community such as this?
Bill, I went first last time. It's yours.
Okay. Speaking from my prior experience, which of course is not here, I've been here 1 year now. As the purchasing director for Spokane County, the approach that I took, and I will say that that approach served me well, would be to, I would meet with the commissioners. As I said before, there was no installation, there was no barrier for me to meet with the commissioners. I would meet with them. I would talk to them about my needs. I would meet with the CEO. I would make sure that the needs were presented in cogent argument and supportive with fact and information. And it worked well. I don't recall being shot down in my experience. Now that might, like you say, may have been the luck of the draw. I don't know, but it hasn't been my experience. To be communicative, to inform, I believe, and in my experience here, since I've been here with this county, this set of commissioners that we have, and every commissioner that I've worked with in the past, I believe they took their duties and their responsibilities very seriously, and they were logical, reasoned. They listened to the arguments you were presenting, and I believe they wanted to do the right job and a good job for constituents. And I just got to believe that working together collaboratively in that manner, successful outcomes will be achieved.
I fully understand that, and I can understand you going to the commission and explaining it. But I also know the commission has to look at a budget that is so big, so much money there. Now, you want a slice of the pie, and you need it, I understand. But so does he, and so do I. So how do you reconcile that? Is it a manager that we need that could do that, or is it coordinated well enough on trust between each other?
Well, it's for the commissioners to reconcile. How they will reconcile that is for them to determine. But I will tell you that with regard to the assessor's office and the function that my office performs, it is statutorily mandated that the commissioners will fund the needs. I don't have the experience of, pushing that button and to see where it lands. I don't know, but I am familiar with the statute that they have to fund it.
That's the philosophy my daughters use too. I need to fund their needs.
Yeah.
I guess I don't have that statute. There was no statute that said they have to fund the sheriff's needs directly. I guess that good for the assessors for having that in statute. But I think it came down to an understanding, and I know that more than once we've sat around as elected officials and a lot prior to Bela coming on board and said, hey, what can we do without to help make this work for everybody? And the elected officials, we get together and we work together. We all have this common goal. We want the best for the people we serve. And sometimes, maybe from the sheriff's standpoint, if I knew that I needed another deputy in Athol, because the northern part of the county is growing by leaps and bounds, maybe it's time for the mayor of Athol to call the county commissioners and say, gosh, I need another deputy up here. Or maybe it's Ron McIntyre who just put the new store in Athol, Super One, and he needs to say, gosh, we need another deputy up here so we have better coverage to cut down the thefts in my store. And, you have to, they get tired of listening to me. They get tired of listening to Bela. They get tired of listening to all the elected officials. But it's the people who put them in office, and that's who needs to tell them what their needs are and where their priorities should be.
The other thing I'd like, if I may, I'd like to add to that. When it comes to the point where the mandate is unfunded and what has to happen statutorily can't happen, well, that's when they figure things out and they find a way to fund it and they make it happen. And just as this might not be a really good example, but this country did not have a terrorist problem until the towers came down, and then stuff happened. And so that's typically what happens in government. The crap has to hit the fan, and then there's a come to Jesus meeting and people find money.
Kristen?
Yes, actually, some of us, you might be heartened to hear, are actually using the NACO database and have been using that to reach out across the country to other states. You do mention that 60% have the same form of government we do. I think what's important, though, what I'm trying to do is look at states that are like Idaho. I don't want to compare myself with New York. I don't want to compare myself with California. I don't even want to compare myself with Minnesota. I want to look at things like North Dakota and South Dakota, places that are rural but have recreational areas like we do, have a similar lifestyle. So that said, I actually have reached out, and I know that you did speak with 44 other county assessors in Idaho, and you said you encourage us not to just think of Idaho. Have you ever reached out to any of these states where the assessor is hired to talk to them about what their concerns are in terms of that model versus the model that we have here in Idaho?
So this topic of a commission study is a relatively recent development here at Kootenai County for me. I was only recently asked to join and participate before the study commission. Time did not permit, so no, I have not done that.
Okay.
It is not to any degree of neglect that I've not done that, but my primary function is the operation and running the business. I'm not a study commission member, and so no, I've not done that.
No, I understand. I didn't expect you actually to have said that you did, but I just want, because it's been, I do believe that there's a lot of information in the NACO database, and I do believe that it's important to look within our state. But I just wanted you to, if it makes you feel assured or not reassured, that there are some of us who are looking at that and reaching out to people in other states and gathering that sort of information, because it is our job.
Oh,
You're absolutely right. I was quite impressed that you put all the effort that you did into it, and I thank you for that. But just wondered if you had any colleagues in any other states
Yes, there.
that had hired, were in a hired or appointed position rather than elected.
I did not, again, I did not have engaged in any of that type of conversation. I do interact with assessors from other states through the IAAO. But in the course of my duties in the short time that I've been here, there's not been a need or a reason to ask that question. And by my suggestion and my comment to reach out to NACO, I did not mean to in any way insinuate or suggest that there was neglect on the part of anyone in the study commission. So I apologize if it came across that way. That was not the intent.
I didn't take it that way. I just wanted you to feel assured as a citizen and all those listening that we really are spending a lot of time outside of just this meeting educating ourselves and gathering information. Thank you.
Bob, any questions?
I wanted to follow up a little bit on the manager aspect of it that you were talking. I take the manager would work for the County Board of Commissioners. How would he, on a day-to-day basis, since he doesn't work for you, what kind of interaction, what kind of help would he give you on a day-to-day basis, so to speak, that would justify his existence? Because he may come to you wanting to have a different color carpet than you want to have, and you can just tell him to shove it.
That's right, I could.
Right.
That's one way to put it. I think that the role of the manager, and Bailey, you can help me out here. How many different department heads answer to the Board of Commissioners? 13 or 14?
Something like that.
But they answer to a board. And a board all has differences of opinion. But when you get to the point of the funnel, the manager, he's the one taking the message from that board, the policies that the board wants. He's the one at the point of the funnel that distributes them back out to those department heads. He's the liaison for the other elected officials. Much like Baylor's experience, the door is always open to the board, and I could always pick up the phone and call a member of the board and get a quick meeting with him if I wanted to talk to him about a specific topic. And quite honestly, I could get on the agenda pretty darn easy if I needed to the board. And I know that in the past, that was never a problem here when they did have a manager. But I see that person as a person who's going to maybe explain the policy to me that the board wants to implement. And there are certain policies that they can implement. For years here, we didn't have a policy on moving money within our budgets. So once the budget was approved, if I had $200,000 in my fuel budget and I wanted to take $10,000 of that and buy ammunition, I could do that. And then there was a policy that came down and said, no, if you're going to move more than $5,000, it has to be approved by the board after the budget's been set. And that was totally within their purview. Totally. And, we asked a lot of questions. Why? And they said, well, we set the budget for a reason and set these line items. And we think that's where it needs to stay unless you can convince us that it needs to be moved more than $5,000. Now, I never was denied when I needed to move money. Not once. But they were being good managers, good stewards. And I think that's good. I think that's what the manager does. He oversees those 13 or 14 department heads, and he's the liaison between the board and the other electeds. Not a blockade, but a liaison. Hope that answers your question, Bob. Thank you.
Kurt, any more
Did you want to
questions?
go to the?
I can't hear from them. I just checked with Dave. He didn't have any questions. I haven't had a chance to talk to Kristen.
Okay.
Christie,
Sherry?
I should be able to hear them? Dave, can you hear me? Can you speak?
I can speak and I still don't have a question.
Okay, good enough. Sherry, did you have any questions?
No, I don't have any questions. Thank you.
Okay. Kurt?
So a question for you, Bela. You talked about speaking to the other assessors in Idaho, and you mentioned that they were all concerned that moving to an appointed approach would undermine the checks and balances. Were there any other aspects that they gave you input on, or was that really the primary question that you posed to them?
So I met with, there was an Idaho Association of Assessors that took place 2 weeks ago in Salmon, Idaho, and I was there. And not all assessors were there, but 40 out of the 44 were there.
Okay.
Prior to that, I targeted, I want to say, probably the top, I can't give you an exact, I don't exactly remember, but it was probably about the top 5 or 6 counties
Okay.
that I actually gave them copies of the questionnaire. and asked them to email me back their responses. Did not get a response back from Ada County, although he was leaving and timing wasn't right. He was leaving office for vacation but I did get responses from about 4 or 5, not comprehensive, detailed responses. And then when I was at the meeting in Salmon, Idaho 2 weeks ago, I didn't have the questionnaire with me, but I mentioned the topic. And so the only question I really floated to the assessors there was the general idea and the concept of, I referenced the statutes of, and the study commission statute and the optional forms of government statutes and said, of the possibilities, this could be one of them, and one of them would be the the elimination of the 6 elected offices to be appointed, possibly a manager and a executive, and so forth. And so their feedback to me, their verbal feedback was what I just related to earlier tonight. I have since then, yesterday was my first day back, and I did send an email out to all of the assessors, giving them, every one of them, the questionnaire. And I haven't yet received a response back.
Okay, thank you.
Tamara?
A follow-up question for both of you on the county manager. Obviously, it sounded like you had a very good experience in Spokane. But Ben, you mentioned that in the past, the county manager here, essentially an at-will employee, told a commissioner no, and then was fired. So the issue of consistency and having a county manager would then be predicated upon the county manager actually lasting a long time. But it seems from what you said that that would then be only, they could last a short time. So how do you guarantee consistency on a position to help with the county commissioners when they're an at-will employee and could actually be fired at any time? I guess there's an assumption there that I'm not understanding, that they're gonna last or they're gonna be fabulous, because theoretically.
The only way I could possibly, and I will first qualify this by saying I was not privy to all of the information in terms of how the CEO or the administrator was set up in their office, but knowing a little bit about business and government and structures, I could just imagine that there was probably a golden parachute agreement that if things went off the train track, so to speak, it would cost the county a lot of money. So there were some teeth in it, so that commissioners could not go maverick on the situation.
Okay.
I think too that, and it's my opinion only, but I think too that if the people elect commissioners who have the idea that, yes, we're going to have a manager, and sometimes that manager is going to be at odds with us, but that's their job, is to sometimes point out the wrong things that we may be doing. Keep it on a professional basis, not a personal basis. Then I think the people will demand that position remain, unless there's some grievous violation. And I think that the commissioners will learn to work with that. It was new commissioners and what they wanted to do, and the administrator, the manager, they just didn't get along.
And I just want to qualify what I said a moment ago. That's speculation on my part. I don't know that any such agreement exists. I don't know that any such agreement existed,
Yeah,
but
no, that's not been
I
said.
could only speculate. And I don't mean to in any way by suggesting that to take anything away from Marshall Farnell, how high of a caliber of an individual he was. So it could well be that there was nothing. But I just step back and I ask myself the dynamics, knowing the dynamics of human interaction. If I were king for a day, how would I set it up? I probably would structure it with some teeth in it with an agreement. So that, and I could imagine that would be effective.
Teeth in agreement to prevent like a open door policy for
So that
people coming and going, or?
What I mean by that, what I mean by that is by having a teeth in an agreement that, so the executive, the hired executive, or manager who would be serving at the pleasure of the board could not be here today and gone tomorrow at the whim of the commissioners, because perhaps he took a position on something that the commissioners didn't agree with.
So you're saying the same thing.
So in that case, if I were structuring that, what would I do? I probably would structure it with some teeth in an agreement, so that if for whatever reason, one commissioner or two commissioners couldn't get smart about the situation and, hey, we're gonna get rid of this guy.
Because they have the authority to hire a county manager right
Correct.
now
Correct.
without anything changing, us doing anything, recommendation, whatever. So
Correct.
it's just interesting to me that if that is a predominant problem within the structure, why is that not being done currently?
I can only give opinions.
Oh, I know, and that's probably a better question for the county
And
commissioner.
my question
agree.
is it a predominant problem? And I don't know, where's the data? I haven't seen any information. I hear a lot of anecdotal statements, but where are the specific examples that said there's a problem?
Thank you.
Bruce, any questions?
Yes. My question is for Sheriff Wolfinger. You'd been with the county for quite some time prior to retiring, and I presume that you were with the county government for all, the original study commission for the
Yes, the
optional form
original.
of government.
Yeah, right.
So you've been able to witness on 3 separate occasions the BOCC examining this issue. And I would have to assume that there is a real problem with the existing form of government. And I'm just curious what your thoughts are as to why the BOCC insists upon revisiting this issue. What's driving their motivation to want to look at changing the existing form of government in the county?
I think they're looking at some of those positions that people kind of scratch their heads when they go, why do we elect a coroner? Or why do we elect the treasurer? Everything he does is by statute. And I think they're hearing that. And so they said, well, the law allows us to do this, and it may be more efficient. It may not. But I think that's why they put it to a study commission. And honestly, you're right, Bruce. I have, watched these other study commissions over the years. And I think this commission has probably, and it's not saying anything bad, but what I've seen so far is you guys are much more in depth than a lot of the others have been. And I think you're really digging into it deeper and deeper. And I think that's probably part of the evolution of the study commissions. At first, when it first started, we didn't know what we were doing. The study commissions were like, okay, we're going to study this, we're going to look at this, but how far do we need to go? And the second one was, okay, we're going to go a little bit deeper. And this one's really digging the earth up. And that's good. I think you're really looking at it. I think it all comes down to what's efficient. Could it be part-time commissioners with a manager? Could it be appointed, some positions appointed? Personally, I never understood why the coroner was a partisan position. Because when you see the coroner the last time, he doesn't care what party you're from, right? I mean, there's certain things, and that's outside the scope of this commission. I get that, but there's certainly questions that are probably raised, but maybe best answered by the county commissioners.
Is that a question you're asking me to answer as well?
If you'd like to, sure.
And to make sure I understand your question, why are we revisiting this again?
Yes.
I don't know the answer, but I've heard the argument that, like Ben has just said, that that the structure of government, it's alleged, is inefficient, ineffective, it's cumbersome, it's slow, and so forth. My question is, show me the data, show me the examples. If there is one place where we can and we should make the comparison of government to private sector, show me a place where in private sector, businesses make decisions without data. That is the epitome of inefficiency, if not the textbook example.
Okay, well, thank you.
Brian? Bill?
Yeah, I know it's getting late, I'll be quick. You both have to run for election once every 4 years.
Correct.
And that's the final thing, hey, we like it, we don't, and that's kind of the line you draw. But for purpose of accountability, your office arrests people. So they're probably not happy with you under any circumstance. A lot of them probably can't vote any longer anyway, so they're out of the picture.
That's true, yeah.
And with you, people are filing complaints that their taxes are too high, so they're probably not too happy either. Although if you explain, I think they kind of understand. The question I have is, other than running for election, what do you do as an elected official to reach out to people, to get a sentiment of what the public is thinking about how you're enforcing the law, how you're assessing property, even though it's by law? But what outreach do you actually engage in to connect with the public for accountability purposes?
I'll tell you a real brief story. Shortly after I took office in January of 13, I went to the city of Harrison, and I walked in City Hall and introduced myself to the city clerk, and she said, "I know who you are." And I said, "Oh, good." She goes, "What are you doing here?" And I said, "Well, I wanted to see how we're doing." I mean, you're the city clerk in Harrison, you talk to the people here every day. How are we doing? How's our deputy down here doing? And she goes, "Oh, boy, we love him. He's great, does a great job." I said, "Well, it's good to hear." She goes, "No, really, it's not an election year. What are you doing here?" And I said, "Well, you're going to have to get used to me coming down here."
Yep.
And I did that from Athol to Harrison and Bayview to Worley. I just go down and talk to people. And I'd go to the city council meetings, and I'd go to the chamber meetings. I was a judge in the chili cook-off in Bayview, multiple years. But I just got out and talked to people. And I would go walk around and talk to business owners. I would go to public events. I wanted to hear what people had to say. And I thought that was very important. And, in a business where the customer is usually wrong, was like my business was, it's funny. You say, yeah, not everybody's happy, but my last election, I had over 81% of the vote with a challenger. And so we must have been doing the right thing, because not everybody didn't have the right to vote. Yeah. And so I think we were doing the right thing for the people. And I think one of the first things they want from government is public safety. Yeah. And we try to provide that and do our best to do it.
Thank you. Thank you.
Being new, I have not done that at this point yet. As I alluded to earlier in my presentation, there are, let's just say, lots of opportunities that are demanding my attention right now. I walked into the office with what seemed to be a vacuum in leadership. I had, at that time, a chief deputy who had been in his position for less than a year, a little over a year. I had 2 manager positions that were vacant. About 8 or 9 months into it, my chief deputy left the county. I have a significant number of personnel that are on the cusp of retiring. I have many processes that are not documented, that are manual, that the system, the computer system that we have, simply does not do the process on. So there have been manual workarounds for that. And those people are retiring. And so I would be remiss in the performance of my duty if I spent my time out there engaging in community. That does not to say that I should not be doing that. It needs to be done. It is a slippery slope right now. And right now, I believe that there are matters that need my attention and my focus. I have focused myself in hiring and filling the chief deputy position. That was filled with her first day in office, July 19th. And we are now moving rapidly to address the various other issues that need to be addressed. So I don't know if I've answered your question, but it absolutely does need to happen. There needs to be engagement with the public. We did have staff at the fair, at the county's booth at the fair. It was a very difficult year last year with COVID, with the state, the Idaho Transportation Department rolling out a new GEM system, which, let's say it was not an impeccable rollout. It caused issues. We had mass migration. We had lines out the door. There were lots of issues. And I had frontline staff that were taking the brunt of the frustrations of the public. And frankly, they could get paid more at McDonald's, and so some of them were leaving. And so it's been a lot of my time and effort in terms of interviewing and filling positions. And so it's just an unfortunate situation, but it's what I'm dealing with right now.
Kristen?
I don't really have a question. I want to thank you both for coming, as I've thanked all the others who have come. I think that of all the elected positions, everybody knows who the sheriff is, and all of your staff are so visible to us, and so it's easier for us to know what you do for the community. It's harder in some of the other departments, as you just alluded to. If it's not broken, everybody thinks it's not even there. And when it's broken, that's when you hear about it. So I see, if nothing else, the purpose of the study commission has been to bring out to those of us in the community and those who are listening and those who are in the audience a much better awareness of county government and how complex it is. So I don't see it as a waste of time at all. I actually see that it's benefited not only us, but probably our potential elected officials in learning more about what's going on in county and how, if and when they get in office, they can do an even better job for the people. So thank you.
Thank you.
Good point, thank you.
Bob?
I don't have a question either, but as with others, we're out in the community trying to get a reading also, just as you mentioned when you were running for office. And a couple of the commissioners have made a statement to us that whatever we recommend, they're going to put on the ballot. I was hoping that whatever we recommended, they would look at and decide what they were going to accept and what they would, but that's not what they're apparently going to do. So we're getting an earful. I think I can speak for a lot of the other folks about what they think and, you know, what can we get past the voters? Because whatever we say is going to the voters, and they're going to have the last say. Hopefully we make some good recommendations.
I think that's the beauty of the way the constitutional amendment was written and the statutes were written, is that whatever comes out of it, the people still get to decide.
Yep. Thank you.
Dave, any questions? Dave, can you hear us?
Yeah, no question.
Okay. Sherry, any questions?
No questions, and thank you, gentlemen, for presenting tonight. It was really great.
Kurt, any more
No
questions?
questions, thank you.
Tamara? Bruce?
No questions.
Bryant? Bill?
Thank you.
I believe we've gone the rounds. Gentlemen, I thank you both for your presence, for everything you've given us.
Thank you.
I apologize for how long we ran, but we don't really control that too well.
Well, thank you for all the work you're putting into this. I really do appreciate that.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you both very much.
On to our next item.
Next item on the agenda is a discussion of a potential conflict of interest. What I wanted to bring up, Bruce, is you've announced your candidacy for commissioner, and I congratulate you. I wish you good luck on it. I do. My problem is that this commission has become very politicized. Even without us developing anything, without any deliberation, people have been going crazy about the political consequences of this commission. I think that the fact that you have announced and you are now running a campaign for a county commissioner is going to politicize this commission even further. I think that it would be in the best interest of the commission and your campaign if you were to resign the commission and put your efforts into the campaign for commissioner. Unfortunately, as an alternate, your real function here is if someone that is one of the three commissioners resigns or is unable to perform the function, that person would be replaced by you. If you were to replace them while you're running for commissioner, it would raise a question how you were voting on whatever it is we're talking about, whether it's trying to move the commissioners to a manager commissioner or an executive commission form, taking the commissioners to part-time, therefore changing the job you're running for. I just think it would be best if you were to focus your efforts on your campaign and separate from the commission.
Are you finished?
Yes.
Well, I certainly appreciate your opinion on that, and that's exactly what it is. It's an opinion. You know, as far as the conflicts are concerned with Idaho statute, it has to do with a personal financial benefit. As far as the politics of this commission, I have said nothing outside of asking perhaps challenging questions. I've made no public comments about my opinion on anything up to this point. I don't have any intention of using this platform for any kind of campaigning endeavors. In fact, I've been significantly more silent than you have. In fact, you want to talk about adding to the politics of this, look at your letter to the editor. It was done without advance notice of this commission. You would not have had access to those emails of the people that you listed by name in the letter to the editor unless you were the chairman of the board. You wouldn't have known who to request or what to tell the person who requested the FOIA for which emails to ask for. You just wouldn't have known it if you were outside of this commission. And so I just find it ironic that you make these statements about me when in reality, I think it's really you that's doing these things. And, I wish that you didn't see it that way. No different than the additional agenda item to make the alternates not be able to participate in debate. I feel like I have asked challenging questions to people. I have been approached by other commission members to say, keep it up. You're doing good work. All I want to do is get to the truth. And hopefully, the commission will stand by the original bylaws and allow someone like me to participate in the debate because the best idea should win. And good ideas stand up to scrutiny. And you, of all people, Mr. Chairman, I think would appreciate that, not only just from the success you've had professionally, but your education. You know that. You have an MBA, like myself. So honestly, I'm surprised. Well, maybe I shouldn't be surprised. Maybe just by the way you operate outside of this commission, maybe I shouldn't be surprised that you are suggesting I'm going to be the political one. but that's not the case. So I hope that the board here sees what I'm doing, how I'm operating, and that I can assure you that I certainly wouldn't use this platform to try to campaign. If you put me outside of the board or the commission, then I could sit right over there and have banners. But as long as I'm sitting at this table, I will operate in good faith as an alternate on this commission. So I appreciate your opinion, but I disagree with you.
Very well.
I actually do have a question.
Kristen?
You are an alternate, Bruce. If one of the Board of Commissioners, if the Board of Commissioner who appointed 3 people, if one of those 3 steps down, then you become a full member. I think the question, though, is, and I must say it's in my head and in my heart, if you're running for a position as one of 3 county commissioners, that's telling me right now that you believe in that form, and therefore, we haven't even gotten to the deliberation, and yet you've stated to me how you feel. You would be voting to keep everything exactly the way it was.
Well, I find your logic to be interesting because by virtue of me tossing my hat to run for commissioner, you're linking that with my acceptance of the current form of government. No matter what happens, there's still going to be a commissioner that's going to have to run for a district. So I don't really see how you're drawing that connection. But what I can say is that, if you want to get into conflicts, by virtue of being a commissioner and running for re-election, many of the decisions they're going to make are going to be more politically oriented for re-election than I could ever make on this commission. The reality is that this commission can do nothing more than make a recommendation that'll end up on a ballot for the public to vote on. So I find that logic to be slightly flawed, and I'm sorry, I just disagree with you.
I think I'd have to say also that if you're suggesting he should wait until the outcome of our recommendation has been run through the gamut of a vote and potential change, which would be years in the future, before he considered running for office, that seems flawed to me. I have to agree with Bruce's point.
I'm not suggesting that. I'm suggesting we make our choices. I think you might make a darn good county commissioner. I happen to be a Republican voter. But I also, when I joined this group, I came with a blank slate. I didn't come with a preconceived notion. And my only concern is that if I were to, I know that if I were to run for county commissioner now, I would be running for one of 3 seats. I wouldn't be running for a potential part-time position in a district that I didn't even know how it aligned. I guess maybe I see things just a little bit more clear. I think we need to be very open and transparent with our colleagues. And this, when I read the article in the paper, it gave me pause. That's all I'll say at this point. It gave me pause. And so I have, as a member of this group, the right to express my concern, just like you're expressing your opinion and you, Kirk, are expressing yours. I would prefer if you don't try to put my logic down and just allow me to express my opinion on this topic.
I think giving pause is really not a very good reason for someone to resign their position just because you have pause.
Brian, you may want to put the...
It's on.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't see it.
I think that's a very low standard, and I think we've gone from conflict of interest, then we've turned into discussion of politicization, and now we're down to, well, it gives me pause that you're here. I think that's a lousy reason for someone to resign.
All he did was all Dave did was bring it up, and we're discussing it. I guess I feel like I'm being put down for even discussing it. Do we vote I don't know where it goes from here. I'm feeling like I'm not supposed to express my opinion. And,
I wasn't suggesting that. I was just saying
Neither
that
was I,
you're.
Kristen.
Well,
I
but-
appreciate your opinion. I
you're
just differ with
parsing
your
my
logic.
words now. You don't like the fact that I say pause. You don't like, I mean, it just doesn't
That isn't,
seem.
I didn't say that. I just said that's a low standard for him to resign.
And you didn't hear me ask him to resign. What did I say? I said, I read the article in the paper, and it gave me pause and some concern, because when I joined the group, I can only speak for myself. When I joined the group, I came knowing very little, if anything, about county government, including this government.
So does your concern or pause mean he should resign, or is that your opinion? What is your opinion?
I'm not going
based-
to, you're a lawyer. I am not going to give you my opinion. I'm trying to say that I have a concern about, I think Dave has a right to bring it up, and I think we have a reason to discuss it. I don't understand why someone should be intimidated from discussing it.
I have a right to discuss it too.
Yes.
We are discussing it.
But you're not doing it in a very, you're doing it in a, well, I guess I see what you're doing, so enough. If no one, I'm beginning to get angry, and I was not at all angry. I thought maybe this was something that we should as a group discuss. But now I'm feeling like, I'm feeling like I don't want to talk. It's 8:25 at night, and I don't want to talk about it anymore. If nobody else cares, I guess I don't care. But I really think there's something at the heart of it that just doesn't sit right with me. Maybe it's the way my conscience works. Maybe it's because I came into this with very good intentions, very open to everything, and it just seems strange that someone would want to declare for an office that is part of the form of government that we're supposed to be evaluating. I just don't understand it. Maybe it's me. Maybe no one else has a problem
Well,
with it.
perhaps I can clarify that for you, okay? Because we've discussed that in this room. That if a new form of government is voted on by the citizenry, it would be at least 4 years before that change could fully take effect. At least 4 years, okay? For this particular position, it's a 4-year term. So, and there's nothing that can be done. Once the citizens vote to change the form of government, it's not going to change unless they vote again. Okay, so I don't understand where you're coming from, frankly. And second, part of the reason I've tossed my hat in was because of the issues I've learned by being on this commission. That there's a lot of issues in our county government that are not getting addressed. And they need someone who can address them. So that's why I'm doing this. I'm not doing this for some, reason that you might be thinking of. I had a blank slate when I came in here too. So I'm just surprised that you are making these suggestions like this. This is how it worked in my mind. I'm sorry it didn't seem to work you couldn't seem to pick that up with me.
Actually, Bruce, you're misstating the implementation. If someone is already in office when this is passed by the voters, they remain in office for the duration of that time. However, if someone is elected in the same election, they do not take office in the seat unless it's changed. So if there was a change to a part-time set of commissioners, the commissioners who were already in office would remain in office, the one commissioner who is in office would remain in office for that duration of the time they were already elected. The two commissioners who are running for this election would then be bounced from a full-time to a part-time.
Okay, so then again, how would that be a conflict with respect to?
If you're running to take a full-time position, and we are discussing making those part-time, it raises a question politically why we're voting to keep them full-time.
Okay, well, may and is are two different things. So I think the rest of the commission here, they can say what they'd like to about it, but may and is are two different things.
No one has asked the commission to bounce you. I'm simply suggesting that what you're doing is creating an appearance with the public that is detrimental to the commission, and I'm asking you to remove that appearance.
Well, what I think you're doing with the public is a detrimental to this commission, because when I saw that letter to the editor, I have to tell you, I was ashamed. Because
You were ashamed of a letter
Can I
to
make
the
a
editor
comment
that
I was
says
ashamed.
this is what the statute
that,
is?
Hey,
no,
stop it a
by
second.
listing citizens' names as a form of intimidation, that if we don't like the email you send us, we're gonna put your name in the paper.
There was no
Now, that is
intimidation, Bruce.
unbecoming of
No
a
intimidation,
chairman
Bruce.
of any committee, in my
To
opinion.
say that people are objecting to this without giving an example would be improper. So I had to give examples of the objections to the existence of this commission.
Fine, don't print their name.
I think we're probably getting off the topic.
I think
the
you're probably
topic
right,
way
Dave.
and way off base.
Yeah, well,
All that was being said, Bruce, was you're running for public office. Being here and doing that does have an impact, good, bad, or indifferent. In your mind, if you're good with it, then go with it. But all they're saying is think about it a little bit. That's all.
I believe me, I've thought about it, and quite honestly, it's a more precarious position for me to remain on the commission for that very reason, that I actually have to be even more careful about how I operate and what I say, and that I could actually hurt my campaign by continuing to remain on this commission. And I don't have a problem with that.
I fully understand that. We weren't saying good, bad, or indifferent. Now, you could say something here that someone could use against you, is gonna run against you. Trust me, it won't be me, okay? But I just think, think about that's all. I think what's being said. If you disagree, you disagree, and go run for office and sit here till you're done.
Fair enough.
If you believe you can be unbiased, then continue on this. I'm simply concerned about the image that we're presenting to the public, because we're going to have to deal with the public.
Well, I believe that I can be unbiased on this commission, and I believe that, that everyone else on this commission, as long as public statements are made as a commission and not as individuals who operate on the commission, I think everything will be just fine.
Can we all go to close now and have a beer?
Well, you know what disappointed me about the potential of not being able to participate in the debate is that I was actually going to recommend that we get some children's inflatable pools and fill them with mud, so at least we could have some comic relief in between this. But that may not be an option for me, at least, so.
I think it would drive our cleaning costs up, and we're not supposed to be driving up costs.
I've done some things that may look like a daycare, but.
I think there's one issue that we're maybe either blowing up or, I don't know, is that regardless of what we recommend, which doesn't happen until May, and whatever goes on the ballot doesn't go until November, it will be two people, two commissioners running for office.
That's right.
So whatever our recommendation is doesn't change the fact of how many people are running, because that won't happen until later. So I don't think him being here actually makes any difference, because it doesn't change the dynamic of what will be on the ballot, period. Our recommendation will be following that, but then it doesn't even go into be implemented until much later. So he's not, I don't feel that he's misrepresenting any type of idea of optional government or anything else, or leading or politicized or anyway, because it doesn't change the fact of what's going on the ballot, period. Whether he's running for office or not. I mean, in that, to me, in that logic, it means that nobody should run for county commissioners then, because the potential could be that a couple years later, it will all change. So nobody needs to do it right now, or just keep the same people we have right now because of what the potential change could be, and that's not logical either.
My response to that, Tamara, is I believe no one on this commission should be running for office.
Well, we already have people who are
No one
holding other
on this
offices.
commission.
Joan's in an office, Dave's
No, she's
in an
not.
office.
Neither
She's
one
on
of
a board. He's on
On a
planning
board.
and zoning. They
She's
have
on
to
a
deal
board,
with
Dave
things.
is on a board. They are not in office, they are not running for office.
Bob was.
Bob was not in office when this commission started.
Yes, he was on the
Bob had
library
already lost
board.
the board.
He
position.
had not lost it when this commission started. He actually had the conversation that it would happen within a short time period. So are you saying that if Bob had won his spot back on the library board, that you would have asked him to resign as well?
We had already gone to legal to ask specifically about that.
And the answer?
They differed from, that his position was a volunteer position, was not a paid position. The county commissioners are a paid position.
Okay.
All I'm saying is my position is that of this group, none of us should be running for an office, at least until after this group is ended.
Well, that's potentially when the time frame will really happen. I mean, if we go through the whole
Well,
length of May.
He's already announced.
He has already
That
announced,
means
but
he's running for office now. That was my problem. And I'm saying it's my problem. My problem is that he announced during this, and it's my position, that none of us should be running for office, that it's improper. Sorry, Bruce.
Oh, look, I respect your opinion, you know,
I
absolutely.
believe you can run for office. I believe that it's wrong for any of us to run for office, not just you. It would be wrong for me to run for any office. It would be wrong for anybody here to run for any office.
Well, you
But
know, just,
as long as you can keep that separate from this, and as long as people don't start to see it as being a problem, then I'm fine.
fair enough, and I appreciate that. Thank you.
Have we beat this one to death?
yep.
Almost.
Almost.
I guess I'm waiting for, you know, everything's kumbaya now, except I'm still sitting here. I do feel like you ganged up a bit on me, and I don't think it was necessary. I would just like to have you maybe think about it, and if you want to quietly come up to me and say, sorry if I was, if I pushed it a little bit, but I do feel like it was like 3 against 1, and I'm just trying to give my opinion like everybody else is trying to give theirs.
Welcome to my world, Kristen.
Well, I didn't hear them jumping on you, Tamara.
Oh, it happens all the time.
What, these 3?
Not these.
Okay, well-
Others, yes.
Well, I am not used to it. I actually don't, when you say welcome to your world, don't want to make this a male-female thing, but I did find it a little bit surprising, I guess. So,
I apologize for any feeling you got from me of ganging up on you. I was attempting to continue the discussion.
I think everyone was attempting to continue the discussion. I just feel, if Bruce is sitting there feeling, well, he feels he's a little bit misunderstood about what his intentions were, well, I think I was too, so.
And I'm not sure who's been ganging up on you, Tamara, but if you've had that feeling, I apologize.
Bring it in, we'll take care of it, don't you worry.
I appreciate that.
Ready to move on?
Yes, please.
Please.
I'm ready to move on.
Okay, we have people on September 15th. Nancy?
Come join the microphone, people.
Did we wake you up? We still have,
It's gonna hurt when you stand up, just so you know.
we still have Bob Norris on the 15th.
Bob Norris
Do
on
we
the
have anyone else
15th.
on that night?
No,
Okay,
just Bob Norris.
just Bob Norris.
On the
The
15th.
22nd, are we squared away?
22nd is scheduled for Jill Smith, Dan, who's the Chief Deputy Treasurer, Dan English, City Councilman, former County Clerk, and Sylvia Proud, the HR Director. Nancy Pluff may join her as well. The one thing is that Sylvia has asked, Phil and Joan chimed in with some questions, but she would like some ideas because she suspects she probably should do some research. If there are questions regarding cost of change or what wages look like, she would like to be able to answer those when she's here. So if you do have any specific questions about specific positions, if you would let her know. And then, any general questions would be helpful if she can start to look at that, knowing that then there'll be follow-up questions from there.
I think until we start deliberations, it's probably too early to start asking about cost of change, because we haven't discussed any change. We don't know what changes might come up. I think it would make more sense to go to Sylvia after we've been deliberating, and we have some ideas of what kind of changes we want to make, and then ask her what those costs would be.
Yes, and that was, she just wanted
Because
to check
right
with the
now, we're
group
just
and see
sure
what you're
it would be a
thinking.
shotgun.
Yeah, I
And
think,
we should target it.
I think the only one that would make sense to have her potentially bring us numbers would be the manager role. Because that's a fairly defined construct. And it's probably better to focus on that one rather than saying, well, what would it cost us to hire a coroner?
And then that was her question is, are there any of them that you have questions on, including that, which is probably a good question.
If we're looking at the manager, I don't want to step on what you're saying, Kurt, but if we're looking at the manager, there's a major issue that I have with the way that this has been discussed. Dan English, was it, who was the manager before?
Tom
Taggart.
Taggart.
Tom Taggart. Tom Taggart was an executive assistant. What we're looking at, we would not be recommending, if we recommended it, a replacement of Tom Taggart's position. Under the commission, under the statute, what we would have is a commission manager form.
Yes.
I forget,
Yeah, it would be the
5203,
statutory role,
5204. It would be a statutory role. So if she's going to look at the manager's cost, she needs to look at 5203, 5204, whatever it is, that is the commission manager form, and look at that manager, not the Tom Taggart version,
Right.
not the Ada County version.
Right, correct.
Because those are not what we're talking about
Right.
doing.
Because those are not forms of government change.
That's right. We can hire an executive assistant, or I should say the county commissioners can hire an executive assistant. It's not the same thing as a commission manager form.
Right.
So we need to watch ourselves when we're looking at the manager. Tom Taggart, Ada County manager, not the same thing.
So is that one that this group would like her to look at, as far as the cost, or is it premature on that?
My opinion, premature. Kurt thinks it's
I
time.
think it's worth
I'll open it to the
getting,
others.
getting a sense of it. I mean, I don't think she has to go into depth on it, but I'm assuming that there are tables somewhere that she can probably reference to give us a sense of what kind of range we'd be looking at for somebody in a role, which I'm sure, I don't know how many other county manager models you've found in implementation under statute.
There's a county manager association out there too, so she would just go out to that and get a range, I would think.
Presumably, yeah.
You know,
With public agencies having to be public with their data, it's not that hard to pull that, you know, from a few.
I think it'd be
Annalise,
helpful to
okay.
have.
So we could do, no in-depth, but maybe have an answer to that question.
Yes.
Okay. Any other specific questions, or would you like to email me? Okay. No. We've got a couple of weeks, so.
The 29th is a public comment meeting. We are starting at 5:30, as we typically do. We'll go through whatever we have to go through as far as housekeeping, and then we'll open up to the public. That probably will be 15 minutes, maybe less. We'll open up to the public comment probably around 5:45. It's my memory that we were going to close at 8 o'clock that night, regardless of how many people still might be in line afterward.
Yeah, I think we had some questions about the logistical handling, but
It has been suggested that we have a sign-up sheet, first come, first serve, on the sign-up sheet, and leave it at that, 3 minutes per person. I think it would be best if we were to put the parameters out there on the website. So that
I
people
agree
have
that
some
posting
idea,
that would be good.
and then, we can do an public announcement, maybe in the newspaper, whatever, say the 22nd, the 23rd, for what the ground rules will be on the 29th, so people will know what to expect. Is that reasonable for everyone?
Are we gonna have the sign-up sheet at the door? Are we gonna do one online? How are we gonna do
I
that?
think it has to be at the door. We also did discuss not allowing online comment, except through email, which exists all the time. But for the purposes of the meeting, it would be in person only. And there was some discussion, I think, after the meeting about whether a sign-up sheet is logistically functional. And
Yeah, what
It's-
point would we open that up for people to sign? Like a time frame?
Whenever somebody gets in here, I'm usually here about 5 o'clock. There's usually somebody here shortly after that for me. Nancy gets down here when she can, because she's got other duties. She actually has a real job.
I suspect I won't have a lot to do that day, and I can focus on
Okay.
that particular meeting.
Should we have it maybe earlier? Like, I could try and come by 4:30.
We could hire some people from Best Buy to hand out tickets at the,
Have the
for the
little,
people camping
like
out there the night before.
Exactly. Yeah.
To me, the advantage of one sign-up sheet is you know what order people have signed up in.
Yes, right.
I know that I've been here before when there were cards, you signed up
And
the
that,
card.
yeah, that didn't work so well.
And the problem I saw with that was the cards were handed in groups, and then they got sorted and
And they keep
the
being
order
handed up
changed
there.
and so on.
Yeah.
And it just, I think it's fairer if the people who come here first and sign up first are the ones that we hear first.
Yeah.
So we'll just do a sign-up sheet. We talked about having comment cards to just have as public record for people to write comments on, but not speak.
I know, but my question is, typically when you do a comment card, it's, here's the question, yes, no, I don't care. We don't have a position for people to say yes or no to.
Well, do
So
we
maybe-
wanna just have a blank lined card that they can write their comments on and?
Just a comment card.
But
'Cause I
what are
know
we gonna do
If
with
somebody
them?
wants to come in and just take a piece of paper and write a comment and submit it to us, I'm fine with that. It's the same thing to me as somebody sending in an email,
Right.
anytime. If they wanted to have a comment written tonight and submitted.
Well, the concern I
It
have
wouldn't
with that is the workload that we'd be imposing on somebody in the staff to either scan them or type them in. That
What-
seems,
So what we typically do with something like this is, we would have the table at the door, and to make it expedient at the door for people coming in, not have a long line, have that sign-up sheet, maybe even do one at that door, one at this door, so we could have sort of two lines. They would come in and just literally print and sign, come in the room. Then we have, we could easily modify what we use for our budget hearing, if you were here for that. Just a very simple half sheet with some lines on it, with their name, the city they live in, and a place to write their comments, baskets out to collect those. That would be very easy, and then, yeah, those would get scanned in with the minutes, but that literally takes seconds. We just,
if that's not an undue burden
no, we
on
stack them in the
staff,
machine
that
and
sounds
it sucks
good.
them in.
Okay.
So if we have two tables, which probably would help with the lines, even an odd, so, I mean, it's kind of two papers going back and forth, but that way we know, because you can't have 1 through 50 here and 1 through 50 there.
And that's my problem with two papers.
I know. So it's either a long line or potentially two papers, even, the only thing I could think is even and odd, so it's 1, 2, 3. You have two people, you call them up, we can read. So it just would get people in faster, or do we want it, because I just have a feeling that people are gonna come want to sign up, and we're gonna be starting the meeting, but they're gonna be out there in line, and how do we mitigate?
And one of the things is, they're not going to be in a line. They're going to be in a group pushing to get in. We have not.
Probably true.
I can only think of one meeting where we've had a line, and we had 3 deputies who were ensuring that it stayed aligned, so that's not gonna be the case here. So I do think having maybe more than one point of entry, into the room would be helpful. We could even have someone out front letting people know, if you are not signing up, to speak, if you're just here to observe, please come in the door down here, and, you can come on in this way, but you're not going to get to talk.
Good idea.
So there are a couple of ways to do that. I can put some things down and send it out to you in email, for a few ideas. And staff's been kind of talking about that, because honestly, it'll probably be all hands on deck for our staff that night. We'll have as many people here as we can for the initial, that part of it, and then they can always leave once we get, because honestly, no matter what we do, if we hand out numbers, if we number chairs and say, hey, the first 75 people or whatever, we're going to need a finite number.
Yeah.
Because at some point, we need to let people know when they show up, enough people have signed up at this point, it is not likely.
That's 50 people, and that was if we went from 5:30 to 8, 3 minutes
Right.
apiece. So if we even have some housekeeping to do, we're less than 50 people. So if we cut it at 50, it's a nice round number, we might have 4 or 5 people after the 8 o'clock mark. I mean, obviously, we'd all have to agree to that, but we're not getting more than 50. And then I think something in the newspaper, something would have to be put out that once the meeting starts and we have our initial, because I've been to many meetings where people decide after it started that now they want to speak. And that's not going to be possible. At the public forum, yes, but at this one, no.
Well, and we need to start that outreach now. I already had a question come in from someone who's very familiar with these types of meetings, who was under the,
Impression?
yep, thank you, it's late, under the impression that this meeting was the public hearing.
I've had that too, multiple times.
And so we'll
Yeah.
start the outreach like now to let people know that is not the case. I can talk to the press and let Madison know that as well. And she's
Can we
probably
put something
watching.
specific on the forms of government webpage that will talk about what is happening, how basically the rules of engagement for that night, so that it's very clear for anyone who consults that page, and also as a reference point for the press to link to or whatever.
Yep, and we can put that on the page. We can put a link to it on the front page of our website. We can send it out via Nextdoor and Facebook.
I think that would be good.
I just want to mitigate, get it out there as much as possible so people are aware
Right.
of these parameters versus a public forum, so we don't have a bunch of angry people who feel that they have the legal right to speak, which they do, but that this meeting will be operated differently, and in the public forum, that's a whole new ballgame.
And
Yeah.
make it clear that there will be a later opportunity that everyone can have their say.
Right,
There will be a public hearing.
yes.
But make it clear.
This
that
was not
This
it.
is not it,
Correct.
right.
But there will be a public hearing where everybody gets their say that wants to speak. This one, this is a public comment. It
And
will be limited.
after we get through that public comment, it might be a good time for this group to have a discussion, see how it goes. And if you believe that for the public hearing, you may need a larger venue, that would be a good time to start talking about it, because it would have to be approved by the county commissioners for expenditure.
Right.
So we would want plenty of time to have that conversation.
Yeah.
Good point.
Uh,
Wait, well, the 6th and 13th, do we have other folks that we were still trying to get a hold of? Because I know we've had some cancellations and shifts and things like that. Or are we gonna try to move toward Kristen's report?
I think
and-
we move toward Kristen's report and then deliberations at that point.
Okay,
And
I don't
certainly,
know that
certainly if
we-
there's anyone
we
else
need
you
to take
want to
more
talk to later.
testimony. I think we've taken
I'm,
testimony from most of the people who are involved.
yeah,
The rest of the people would be peripheral at best. And
Fair.
I don't know that they would contribute a great deal to what we need to know.
I tend to agree.
So if that's the case, if everyone's in general agreement with that, we don't have to set it in stone right now. But I think we're probably looking at Kristen's report and then deliberations starting, say, the 6th, 13th, if that doesn't work, if for some reason we can't get on to deliberations the 6th. My mind's on that, probably the first night of deliberations, each person gets 10 minutes to vent, to say what they think, they've heard, what they believe is the best approach to it. We don't necessarily have to start getting into anything except people just sitting down and saying, in 10 minutes, here's what I think I've heard, here's what I think would be the best approach. And then after that, we've all heard from one another, then we can move on to, okay, now I don't think you're right, I think you really have a problem here, and here's the problem I see with what you've said.
I guess the question I have in my mind is, do you have a sense of how long your report and the discussion that would follow that might occupy, as to whether or not we should plan anything additional in that night's agenda? Kristen?
Could be pretty involved. I mean, I'm not the only member of the committee.
Right, that's what I'm thinking,
Yeah,
is
that's-
maybe we should dedicate an entire night to it.
It just, depends on how much data you want. Speaking of data, I could like bury us with data, but I don't think we want that. I think that what you want from me is to, be able to show you my source data, but to pull together kind of common themes or ideas. I mean, out of that, I'm not recommending anything in particular. I'm just really presenting
Right.
what I've heard.
I just think that there may be questions for further exploration and discussion and what have you, so maybe it's worth all the effort you and whoever else was on the committee has put into it, it may be worth dedicating the entire night to it.
Sounds reasonable. Do we have an agreement that probably dedicate the 6th to the report?
That's probably the worst
Except you're
day.
not here for that.
Well, the problem is that's the day I actually leave Alabama, so I don't know where I'll be that night. That's like the, of all the dates, that's the worst one.
Well,
Sorry.
if we remove, Nancy, do you know whether the 5th, the Tuesday before that, would be taken in this room?
Or the 7th.
Or the 7th, the
Would the
Thursday
7th
after?
work for you, Chris?
Actually, it would be better to be earlier because I'll still be in a location, you know, in a house, I mean, not pulling an RV across country.
You're driving, okay.
Are you comfortable doing it remotely, or would you rather have that presentation here
Oh,
personally?
I think anyone would rather do it in person, but I also don't want to hold up the.
Well, I don't think
If
one
we
week.
deferred it to the 13th, would you
Right.
be back?
Oh, absolutely. But,
I'm open to that.
That sounds like a reasonable approach. Go dark the 6th?
Unless
Or-
we come up with something else.
I mean, that'll be the week following our public comment, so it might behoove us to have a time frame to go over the public comments, glean from that. It could be a short meeting, I don't know.
Yeah, wouldn't be bad.
Kind of
Or if
feel
we
the
ended up with an
I'm
overwhelming
following.
response, we could do a
What kind
second
of
night.
go
public
over
comment.
the public comments are you thinking of in a meeting? Because if we've heard the comments here, what are you thinking of as a meeting on the 6th?
I'm hoping to hear really good information and possibly stuff that we may not have considered, things that could be, you know, we would need to process through what we're discussing. So it's just, instead of having a dark meeting, which I'm okay with, actually, it would be nice. I am just throwing it out there, have an ability to kind of process things, talk through things, but my first priority would actually, or preference would be to have a week off.
and Dave, when you, and to you too, Kurt, I mean, note the fact that it's almost 9 o'clock now,
Yeah.
no, I don't need that kind of time. So I guess there's the potential that I could present and we could have our biological break and we could then come back and start to talk about things. The only downside for that is if I come up with something that some of you might find somewhat intriguing, you won't have had time to mull over it.
Right.
Well, we'll still have time to process it.
I think it's
Yeah.
good to give it the time that it deserves with the amount of work that's gone into it from you and whoever else was on the committee. I don't know who all has been involved, so.
Bob and Phil.
Okay, thanks. I think,
They have the county government experience. I have the research background, so we're a
Okay.
team.
I think it's worth giving it the time. You've obviously put a lot of time into it amongst you, and I think it's worth spending the time to
I appreciate that.
To-
Thank you.
absorb it and mull it over potentially until the next meeting. I think the other option we could consider for the 6th, if we have an overwhelming response to the public comment, is if we wanted to, we could have a second night of public comment.
Well, we had discussed, or I had suggested 2 nights of public comment, and everybody wanted to seem to go to one, so. It sounds like one of the best things to do is the 29th public comment, the 6th potentially go dark, the 13th have the report, and depending upon questions and to that, perhaps even a short meeting on the 13th, and actually begin deliberations then on the 20th.
Something along those lines seems reasonable.
Does that seem reasonable to everyone here?
I think that's fine. I would say if we have an incredible turnout, to go back to your point of going ahead, we'll have the week's notice, we're abiding by all the statutes, going ahead and putting out there. People, thank you, sorry. Sorry you couldn't do it tonight, we will be having another one the next week. We can make that determination depending on, if we have a small turnout, we may not need that. I don't think that will be the case. If we have a very large turnout, I think it would actually go well with everybody, public and for the commission, to say, we're trying to accommodate as many people as possible and open that up, so keeping it more flexible. If we don't need it, we go dark. If we need it, we have it.
I'm open to that.
I'm open to whatever the commission wants to do on that. We can decide that the night of the 29th.
Yeah.
If the commission
You,
wants to
are
have a
you
second
okay with
night.
that, Nancy?
That should be fine. One thing you could consider would be,
Sorry to make you check the calendar, but it changed after you went in there to look.
yeah, I won't be here for the second public comment meeting, so,
Yes.
they might be a little short-staffed that day. But, one other thing you could consider, because again, if we record this on Zoom, and if there is to be no back and forth, simply public comment, you could also consider taking that second public comment day, doing it during the day, have as many of you attend as possible. The rest could watch that on Zoom, and it would open it up for a whole new group of people to come. We've done that before. We've done noon and 6, or 2 and 6.
I was gonna say, you can do 2 in the same day?
We've done it before.
Okay.
It's always appreciated, but you could do it separate days. Who could actually be here on that second public comment day, do it a little earlier in the day. If you can't, you can watch the recording and whatnot, so just an idea.
Kurt doesn't like that idea.
Let's just, yeah, we'll hold it as an option and we'll revisit it.
If you want to truly understand the challenge of public officials, it's a great way to go.
Yeah, fair enough.
Yep. Okay. So we're saying 13th for Kristen? Yes?
Yes.
Okay.
And then that runs as long as it runs, and then we adjourn.
Perfect.
And we come back and we start deliberations the following week.
The 20th.
That's acceptable to everyone?
Yep.
Okay. Although it's not set in stone, that's where we'll look at going.
Sounds good. Now I think you can.
Now, your motion would be in order.
I second.
Second, okay, Tamara's got it.
Hands? Good.